Georgia wins it.
This is 365 Sports, powered by SicEm365.com.
Up top into the end zone. Caught. How did he make that one? Travis Hunter.
365 Sports is presented by IdealMRI.com. High-quality MRIs for $497 or less. IdealMRI.com. Your health is important, so is your budget.
Pressure comes, he spins free, and he'll be knocked down. Ball is out. Texas falls on it. It's Vernon Broughton, who's had a monster night, who makes the recovery that should secure Texas's spot in the championship game.
365 Sports is also brought to you by Texas Farm Bureau Insurance, protecting Texans since 1952.
That's where they're going. On a screen, Xavier Restrepo fumbled the football. Devin Gray is off to the races. Ward to beat. Scoop and score.
365 Sports is turbocharged by Unite Private Networks. Find out more at uniteprivatenetworks.com.
McCree, the tight end, on the move, will pull it up and throw the sideline. It's intercepted by the guy that's been picked on all day. Christian Gray down the sideline. Gray still going, and he is on his way for a Notre Dame touchdown.
Now here's Paul Catalina and Craig Smoak.
I didn't know I was on vacation for this long. I'm about to be by, Thursday?
I probably put the wrong open in the folder.
Well, hello. It's 365 Sports, and we are championship weekend, conference championship weekend, and everything is set, and we will discuss those matchups, also how we got to that point, and so much more, including the Big 12, the SEC, the ACC, and also the Big 10. Coaching changes, transfer portal. It's the week of National Signing Day. Sorry, but that's going to have to be pushed back, at least for a couple of days when it actually is there. A few notes. And here we go, 365 Sports. David Smoak, Craig Smoak is back. Paul Catalina is back. I'm back. We have full throttle today. Jack McKenzie, Garrett Ross, and also Emery Winter in studio. I don't even know how we summarize. Texas took the heart and soul of A&M in their backyard. That game was never even close, and A&M never could sniff. Even when they did, they had no chance. Then also in the Big 12, we now finally know who it's going to be after so many different scenarios with Arizona State, Iowa State. You had the Michigan win against Ohio State. So much to get to. And let's start with Iowa State, Arizona State surviving, and that doesn't mean that they survived because they barely won. They are in after what was 1 week after another of crazy in the Big 12.
Yeah, it was a crazy week. Arizona State and Iowa State, though, they took care of their business. Arizona State and Ken Scadaboo, in particular in the first half, just put Arizona right out of it. Iowa State had a brawl in Farmageddon on their hands, which we fully expected because that's what Farmageddon is, and both those teams are good. And somebody's dinging somewhere.
Is the phone on? Is that yours, Craig?
Yeah.
When you take a week off, there are certain fundamental things we forget, right?
Yeah. So anyway, both those games were great. I think that one of them was great. One of them was not great for Arizona, but the Farmageddon game was fantastic. Rocco Becht. Man, there's not many quarterbacks that you kind of want in this conference in the fourth quarter than a guy like Rocco Becht, who just seems to make plays and overcome the mistakes that they've made early on. He's a really good player. I mean, he's no Shedeur Sanders, but again, who is? He's just gutsy and gritty, and I think it sets up for a really great championship game, even though Arizona State, we just found out, will be without Jordan Tyson this week in that game.
Yeah, it was a terrific final weekend for the Big 12 and really competitive games. Congratulations to Arizona State and to Iowa State for booking their tickets, and that's a big deal for both programs. Arizona State leaving no doubts. It was still a very strange weekend, seeing teams that you should just be able to see, like, hey, they win, they're in, and yet it was, hey, they win, but then they need this combination, and this team has to win for them to be able to be in. It was just all really messy, and I wish it was a bit more clear-cut, which is part of the issue with having so many teams in a league, and especially them not all playing each other. But that's just, I guess, something we're going to have to live with. But, yeah, you wish it was a little bit clearer and you could kind of follow the games a bit easier. But nevertheless, it panned out the way that we thought it might last week, which was the easiest scenario, which is Arizona State and Iowa State win, and then the right combination of other teams occurs to just make it those two. And so that's what happened, and here we are, and it ought to be a great game. But, yeah, Jordan Tyson being out is an absolutely massive blow for the Sun Devils. He's one of their 2-3 best players on that team behind Cam Scatterbo and wherever you want to rank him after that. So that's a major, major loss. And then on the Iowa State side of things, they were pretty much dead in the water. It felt like at least 3-4 weeks ago, and right things happened around them, and they won the games they needed to be in this spot where they can now make further history. They made history by winning 10 games for the first time ever on Saturday, booked themselves a shot for the Big 12 championship, and now have an opportunity to go and win that sucker for the first time ever. So, yeah, a little former Pac-12 and a little traditional Big 12, and ought to make for an interesting game in Arlington, although BYU, Colorado, others could have made it spicy as well, but here we are.
We'll hear a little bit from Dave Aranda at about 4 o'clock, an hour from now, on Baylor winning 6 in a row to close out. Some teams in the Big 12, depending on what the expectations were, had a really nice year. Some that maybe feel like they could be a little bit better, and some that are in a free fall, including West Virginia. Neil Brown, after all of up and down, after last year what looked like he did save his job, he's out. We'll have Jed Drenning on today at 4:30. He's their sideline analyst for West Virginia Radio. And Neil Brown is out at West Virginia in Morgantown.
I just think that there was no way that they could have gotten around this. Like what are you going to say? If you're Ren Baker, what are you selling to the fan base? This is a guy who, when you're mad about them consistently losing at home, said in a press conference, well, at least you guys are having fun at the game. And that's just, I don't know what Ren Baker would have been able to do. Well, because he could throw out the lines of, like, we don't know what the house settlement and revenue sharing, and there's a lot in flux and buyouts and blah, blah, blah. You know what the fan base was going to say? So?
Yeah.
Like, that's the point there that they were at. Neil Brown will get another head coaching job somewhere, and maybe that's a better fit, but he just could not get it going in Morgantown, and they need somebody to shoot some new life into that program. They've got a great fan base that's, Gary and I talked about in Triple Option earlier, there's not many, like, compare this to the North Carolina job, right? North Carolina, the best news about that job is that coach can hide a little bit, right? Like, he can, once basketball season starts, he can go in the background and do what he wants to do. With West Virginia, they care about both sports equally. And so because of that, you're going to be out in the forefront. Yeah, they just need maybe a new voice.
I mean, I am curious to know if this was decided before Saturday or not, because if it was riding the line, then going out and getting your ass kicked 52-15 definitely tipped it over in the favor of let's fire Neil Brown. Mm-hmm. If they lose 24-20, is he fired? I don't know, but you lose by nearly 40 points, and that's one sure way to convince people who maybe needed a little bit of a push in one direction or the other that, yeah, you do in fact need to make a change. So I know a lot of Mountaineer faithful are celebrating. There were plenty of people who wanted Neil Brown to do well, but it was just getting very loud and got to the point here towards the end of even when they won a game, they got bowl eligible, it was a negative. Oh, great, now he's perhaps got a chance to stay because they made the postseason. And you knew it just wasn't a situation that was really tenable, and it just felt like a change was needed to just reignite the fan base, to reunite the fan base in some ways, and just to kind of start over, because the Neil Brown tenure has had a good amount of mileage on it, but it's been pretty consistent in a way that's not great for longevity, which is pretty consistently middle of the road, and they need something a little bit more than that at this stage. So when Ren Baker got hired and they made the change at AD, you could have started the countdown clock. Neil Brown had plenty of rope after Baker's hiring to carve out a long tenure, but they just hovered right there in the middle, and that's not enough, and West Virginia fans have seen enough, and I think overall it's it's bittersweet because I do think Neil Brown's a good coach, but just that situation and every time we talked about them this year, even after wins, it's like it just didn't feel right. So this makes all the sense in the world. Neil Brown will get a big paycheck, and he'll go, I'm sure, have teams knocking on his door to be an OC. I don't know how quickly he'll be a head coach again, but I'm sure that opportunity will come at some point as well, and they'll go hire a great football coach, maybe Jimbo Fisher, since that's the hot name that's being thrown out. I also saw Nick Saban thrown out. I've seen it. I've seen it all, so we'll see where they go. But I'm kind of excited, and I don't have skin in the game, but I'm kind of excited to see what they do now.
It's a West Virginia program that from 2005 to 2011 won 11 games 3 times, 10 games once. They won 9 a lot. They won 9 last year, but they've been kind of in a little bit of an up and down, middle of the road, as you said, funk since they won 10 games under Dana Holgorsen back in 2016. And then UCF, another team that they blew a tire. Started off well, looked like they had a pretty interesting team that could make a run. Gus Malzahn leaving to become part of Florida State staff with Mike Norvell, and because of the Seminoles' awful year, they're stealing from others, as you do. You're in survival mode. Gus Malzahn, this to me it really was weird how they just went belly up this year. I thought they were going to be an 8, 9, 10 win team, but I was obviously wrong.
Well, defensively they were a disaster. Ted Roof was not the right hire. And Mike Bianchi of the Orlando Sentinel wrote this yesterday in response to all this, is that a lot of UCF fans saw 6 and 7 in the first year of the Big 12 as, that was good because it was the first year in the Power Conference. They'd adjust to playing a bunch of teams they'd never seen before, and 6 and 7 was good. Gus Malzahn reacted to it in that he didn't think it was good. He didn't think it was a stepping stone. He thought it was bad. So what he did was he ripped everything kind of down to the rivets, brought in a ton of new transfers, flipped the roster, new coordinators, took back play calling and all these things. And none of those things worked out when really maybe he should have just built on it. And you kind of get the feeling when a coach does this, like Chip Kelly did last year from UCLA to Ohio State, that he doesn't want to do all the things that a head coach has to do anymore, which is more CEO stuff. Mike Norvell has to do the CEO stuff now. He cannot just get drilled down into the ball. They're 2 and 10. So What do you do? Like I said, they've got to take big swings. And this is a big swing. He didn't go outside of his tree necessarily because he was a GA for Gus at Tulsa in 2007. So he went back in. If he wants to keep a similar system but build off the guy who invented it, then Gus Malzahn's a great hire for them. And I think that's I like the big swing. Whether it works out or not, we'll see. But I do like the big swing.
You know what sucks? Florida State goes 2 and 10, and they're at the center of today again.
Yeah, well,
because they sucked at 2 and 10.
Yeah.
All right, Craig, your thoughts about Malzahn. Also, there were coaching changes, staff changes at Texas Tech. We'll get to that in just a second.
Yeah, I mean, for UCF, this is a big deal. I think a lot of their fan base wanted Gus Malzahn gone. I think that was evident as the season progressed. He started off 3-0. He finished 1-8 down the stretch. So pretty miserable season overall for UCF that had a spark of belief there at the beginning, but was absolutely awful for the last 9 weeks of the season in terms of every game but the Arizona game, which you won in blowout fashion. But we know Arizona's not the most impressive team in the world. And outside of that, just losses on losses on losses. So I think this is a situation, unlike West Virginia and Neil Brown, where I don't think Neil Brown necessarily wanted to leave. Gus Malzahn clearly saw the writing on the wall. UCF was probably already leaning in that direction, and it works out best for both parties. It's a clean break. Malzahn can go save face and say he didn't get fired, even though that was right around the corner. Maybe not this offseason, but certainly with another year like the one they just had. So that was already a ticking clock. He gets to reset that. You know, if Norvell has another year like this year, and that's actually more the norm, then, oh, well, you're back on the market again. And on the other side of things, UCF already feeling like this is probably not going to work out long term. They get to go ahead and just bite the bullet and get started on the new era. So I'm interested, just like West Virginia, to see the new faces that they bring in and then the new attitude that gets brought in with the new staff as well. But I think this was one of those jobs you looked at, like with the Big 12 in general and hot seats, it didn't look like there would be much activity. But these two jobs right here have gotten the ball rolling, and I think you look at just the way the seasons went, and they make sense for all parties involved. So I think this is a good thing for both Malzahn and UCF.
So West Virginia and UCF looking for a new head coach. Texas Tech is going to have changes on their defensive staff. Joey McGuire announcing that defensive coordinator Tim DeRuyter, who was the one who took almost all of the heat this year, and then also passing game coordinator, secondary coach, Marcel Yates, will not return, so they make changes on that staff. They had a nice run. There were a bunch of teams this year in the Big 12. In fact, I just had the note. 8 teams were 8-4 and better. 9 make it to a bowl game out of 16. Tech was 8-4, but boy, you look at what could have been for them. You look at what else could have been for them, and so Joey makes the staff change with DeRuyter.
Yeah, I mean, you had to do something with the way that defense played throughout the year. That was clearly their Achilles heel. A lot of other things to like about this team. Really great season, all said and done. 8-4 is a nice mark. That's taken another step forward. You can take another step forward if you win 9 for the first time under McGuire. So they're still tracking well, and obviously there's a couple of games that some fans will side-eye a little bit and say those should have been, or one of them, if not both, could have been different outcomes. But regardless, still a really solid year. And a really kind of almost quiet 8-4, because that's a good record, and yet I don't feel like they really got talked much about, maybe just because of the style of games and the way some of them were won and against who some of them were against. But I think dust settling, you're happy about where you landed, feel like you could have done a little bit more, but certainly beats the alternative, and now you're not wasting any time and going to make the changes to get this team better now and moving into next year. And I think they started at the clear weak link, and we'll see, who Joey goes after now, but that's going to be an exciting tracking or hire to track as well as who he goes to get on that defensive side of the football, and especially on that back end.
Ryan Walters, this is actually a couple of days old, out at Purdue. Mike McIntyre out at FIU. Those are a couple of coaching changes too. Here's one.
It was a terrible hire.
Yeah.
It was a terrible hire,
Yep.
Purdue, Ryan Walters. That didn't last long. That was not a good hire. They fired Graham Harrell.
Yep.
Try to make him the scapegoat in some ways earlier this year, and the offense didn't change at all. It was still god-awful. So, yeah, they just whiffed on that one from the get-go. He seems like a good coach, but that's just not the right time, right situation.
Replaced a legend, right?
Yeah,
Jeff
he'll have to go back to the drawing board, and I'm sure he'll be a hot commodity for another staff, but – yeah, Purdue whiffed on that one.
Yeah, App State open as well.
Okay.
Today.
And did you say, was it another Savannah State or someone like a couple other schools?
Yeah, there's other
open?
smaller ones. But yeah, App State, Sean Clark out at App State.
The one thing Nebraska could do is play defense. They could also screw up a wet dream. They can. That's how they just don't know how to win, and they did that against Iowa. But Tony White, who remember last year, I believe it was UCLA that went after him and a couple of others, or maybe San Jose State wanted him. He is leaving along with Terrence Knighton to head to a school we just mentioned. They're not good, and so they're going to find people. And Tony White's a hell of a defensive coordinator, and Terrence Knighton, a defensive line coach for Matt Rule at Nebraska, are headed to Tallahassee.
Yeah, again, like the big swing, go out and get somebody, go outside your tree, bring in new ideas. Look, when you come from Memphis to FSU, you get the benefit of bringing your guys. Your guys go 2-10, then you've got to kind of go outside the tree a little bit. Defensively, clearly they did. Tony White, one of the best in the country. Terrence Knighton, really good. It's really interesting what this means for Odell Higgins, who's been the defensive line coach for 30 years, under Bowden, under Fisher, under Willie Taggart, and under Mike Norvell through 4 head coaches. And he was probably getting close to retiring. They might move him to a university role, but Terrence Knighton coming in and taking over that, and coordinators are going to bring in their guys. It will be interesting to see who Tony White and Gus Malzahn bring in to fill out that staff at FSU, who the only ones we know are the 3 that got fired that have now been replaced, or 2 of them been replaced, and then I don't know what happens with Odell Higgins, but I like the move. Again, but he had to take big swings, and they can't go this guy's an up-and-comer. No. To get the, they went out. Florida State as an institution went out and hung it out there for everybody to see and went 2-10. And then you can't just respond to 2-10 going like, oh, hey, you don't know about this guy from San Jose State, or, this is a dude from UNLV. They might wind up being great coaches, but to sell that to the fan base, you have to take big swings.
Craig, anything on Tony White leaving? Hell of a coach. Hell of a coach. Their defense was pretty good. Not always dominant. Indiana just beat them up in that one game, but every other game was every game other than that was very, very, very close. And of course, they're good at losing one-score games. We've had Casey Keeler on this show before at Sam Houston State. He is headed to go to Temple. He now becomes the head coach. He's been at Sam Houston State, done a hell of a job, won a national title there, and also at Delaware with the Hens. And so he takes the job in going up to the Northeast to be a part of Temple and the Owls football program.
Well, they've been kind of listless since Matt Rule was there, and that's several years ago at this point. So Stan Drayton, came over, and I thought that was a good hire at the time, but didn't work out very well. So they go back on the hunt, and I think this time I feel much better about the strength of this hire because we know Casey Keeler a little bit better and have seen him in action at Sam Houston. Did a great job there. I don't think you'll see anybody from the Sam side of things wishing him anything but best wishes and appreciation for the job that he did there with the Bearcats. So job well done, job well deserved, and I'm excited to see what he can go and do with that program. Not an easy place. But a hotbed of talent there in the Philadelphia area, but not the easiest place in terms of having all of the bells and whistles, but neither was Sam Houston, and he did a good job there. Now it's a little bit of a step up, so I think that's a really good hire for the Owls, and look forward to seeing what he can do.
I went to the chat room and asked Tech fans who they wanted to see leave, if it was DeRuyter or Kitley, because there's been some frustration with Kitley, although the offense put up big numbers, and everyone immediately responded with Tim DeRuyter, who is the defensive coordinator. Let's see here. Transfer portal. Oh, this is the Kenny Dillingham story. Dillingham, I like this young man. He has done a remarkable job. Should be getting votes for National Coach of the Year. I'm sure there are others, including Signetti, Monken, Dion, a couple of Kalani Sitake. He took 100% of his bonus. He got a $200,000 bonus for the 9 wins and spread that out among his staff. Some getting between $5,000 and $10,000 bonuses. Didn't tell them about it. He's giving them his bonus. I thought that's the way to do it. Now, I bet they're probably not paid real well. That might change here with the year that they've had.
But still, that off the field staff for the most part is not that's your GAs, that's your quality control guys, and all that. That is awesome, and that builds a lot of loyalty within a staff as well. And to do it without fanfare, and then to have he wasn't. I think if Ken Dillingham had his way, we would not even be talking about this based on the way that he went about it. But sometimes it's hard to keep a secret. Hey, I just got a $10,000 bonus that I didn't expect, and it's because we got to 9 wins and he gave that to me. Taking care of your coach is an important part of keeping continuity. So.
Our friend Chris Cartman, who we got to know because of realignment, he's done a hell of a job covering the Sun Devils through that time period and also through this 10-2 season so far. Micah Hudson, 5-star wide receiver from Lake Belton High School, not far from where we are, plans to enter the transfer portal. I'm sure that he's going to get whatever he wants. It was always weird whether he was not a part of it or he was hurt or something was going on. It was always weird. I'm not surprised to see this. I have not yet reached out to his head coach, Brian Cope, at Lake Belton, because I've been pretty snowed under most of the day. But I got to figure out what's going on here, and I'm sure everybody has their own scenario of what happened. He was 8 passes, caught 8 passes for 123 yards. When you get a 5-star, unless maybe it's a quarterback, and even those guys get to play pretty quickly, and you don't play, something is weird.
Yeah, respectfully to Brian Cope, I don't think he really is going to shed any more clear light on what's happening other than a 5-star. Didn't get a lot of playing time during his freshman year, and he's going to get a bunch of opportunities outside of that. I think that's pretty clear what probably the main thing is with this whole scenario, because as you said, it was weird all the way through, but guess what? You land a 5-star. We saw the celebration on signing day last year. It was a really big deal for Texas Tech. It should have been. It was the first, 5-star signee and a big get for Joey McGuire and all of those things. But, ultimately, the reason I don't get super overmodulated about signing day is because I'm a reality and results guy. And so to land them is important. You got to do that first things first. But ultimately, it's about what they do. And everybody was wondering why Micah Hudson wasn't doing more. like the first game of the year. Why doesn't he have more catches? Where is he? What's he doing? And that was with the territory the moment you signed him. So as the season progressed and he wasn't getting more catches, more opportunities, sometimes wasn't even out there, it just raised more and more questions. And I know Joey and them, that had to be really annoying to have to constantly police that, but we also don't know what it was like behind the scenes. So it seems like it was just awfully frustrating because maybe he wasn't ready to play or maybe he wasn't doing the things necessary, but the outside world doesn't know that. So they're clamoring for, where's the 5-star? Where's the 5-star? And who knows what really went on behind closed doors, but I can't say that I'm surprised based on how the season went and all the questions that constantly surrounded his playing time. So I figure like he's probably had some pretty packed DMs over the course of the last few months, and he'll have plenty of suitors and plenty of money being thrown his way. So we'll see what he does wherever he goes next. But that's a blow for Texas Tech more from a perception standpoint than a result standpoint, because they're not losing anything football-wise that's tangible that we can feel right now. Like, you can't say, like, oh, my God, what a loss for next year, because you didn't really see enough this year to know.
If he had 80, you'd be like, oh, crap.
Or
it's
hell, 45.
It's a loss
yeah.
perception-wise because he's supposed to be really good, but, like, as far as what actually happened, it's tough to say how much they're really losing. But, yeah, it's a blow, like, ego-wise, I'm sure, and a little bit morale-wise, because that was such a big get for you a year ago. So that's unfortunate it worked out that way. Maybe Texas Tech is better off. Maybe Micah Hudson's better off. I hope it works out for both sides. But, yeah, that's a blow.
Saw this from Scotty B in the chat room that Pete Nako's reporting that offensive coordinator Zack Kitley has emerged as the top candidate for the FAU job, which, of course, had Tom Herman. He has been at Tech, obviously, offensive coordinator at Western Kentucky with that great offense that they've had, and also at Houston Baptist.
Well, it sounds like Red Raiders fans better buckle up for a crazy offseason. I mean, you've already had 2 defensive coaches getting fired, which was a needed thing to happen. Then Micah Hudson news drops pretty shortly in that same time frame, and that's obviously not a positive story. But, yeah, now the rumors about that and whatever else is headed their way, buckle up, because it's already starting off pretty wild for Texas Tech fans. So,
I saw Kim Coulter saying something about a lot of hope in here today for Tech to suffer harm. And then, of course, he does ROFL.
Do you know who I would hire if I were Joey McGuire right now at Texas Tech? Neil Brown.
Yeah, I think Neil Brown's going to get an OC call before he gets a head coaching call.
Yeah.
I said that earlier. I don't know that he'll be a head coach again next year, but I do think that it makes all the sense in the world he could be an OC in a variety of places. So, yeah, that wouldn't shock me. And I think there's some background there with Lubbock, so that would make some sense as well. But, yeah, that's going to be an interesting if that opens up, the defensive coordinator job's what they've got to actually hire right now. That's the one that's actually open. So we'll see on Kitley. There's a lot of rumors flying around right now, but that's at least something to take note of for sure.
Katie Rader, see ya, Zach, bye, no tears.
And that's the thing is, like, some people would be
50 points a week.
Yeah, true, but it's also you need what is it called? Perspective on those 50 points sometimes too. But that's a guy who, if he were to leave, there would be a segment of the Red Raider fan base that would be more than happy with that. And so we'll see if they're not changing both coordinators, but we know at least defensively that's the direction they're heading right now. So Joey's got a lot of work to do.
We have Ari Temkin, Big 12 Radio at 3:40 today. I said Jed Drenning, who covers West Virginia, sideline analyst, will join us at 4:30. Phil Bennett today at 5. We'll also hear from Scott Drew. We mentioned if Micah Hudson had, like, things to grab onto, like stats. Kevin Concepcion of NC State. Wow, 2 years there, 1,655 yards, 18 touchdowns. He has entered the portal from the Wolfpack.
Can I be a crystal ball guy right now? Can I do that?
There's no, anybody can. Honestly.
I'm going to do this. Kansas State. His brother's going to Kansas State.
Oh, okay.
I would say that Kansas State's got a great shot at him, although here's what Kansas State's going to have to deal with. Unless he's already decided that that's where he wants to go, because he is so freaking good that they have to contend with everybody who wants a wide receiver, because he is that good. And didn't have, Grayson McCall transferred there, had to medically retire. Then after that, NC State season, which defensively was already off the rails, went completely off the rails for Dave Doran. And this is not a surprise. So he's going to be in the water, and a lot of people are going to want him a lot.
He's a numbers crunch, big time stats. That's what you're looking for, and yeah, maybe K-State will have a chance to land him.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a really productive dude going in the portal. It'll have a lot of suitors. He'll be one of hundreds of others now that we're going to be talking about. So, yeah, there's just another guy to pay note of. And if there is a chance for Kansas State because of that brother connection, then that would be fantastic for Chris Kleiman and company, who obviously didn't end the year the way they wanted to. We'll have a little bit of a kind of a – not a rebound this offseason, but kind of a – like a regrouping, I feel like. They've got some good pieces, but I think there's still like a lot that they need to kind of figure out there. So maybe that's one of the pieces they go and get to help out their talented quarterback. But, yeah, that's another name to make note of, and there's, I know, a bunch of others we're going to get to. But, Micah Hudson, 8 catches, 123 yards. That was his stats this year.
No, I mentioned it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
That was it. In 5 games, he registered catches. So that's not something that's going to probably – turn a lot of heads, but if you know his recruiting story, then he's still going to, no matter what records he put up this year, going to have a lot of people coming after him as well. So, yeah, there will be a mix of guys, and those two will be right there near the top.
Washington State offensive coordinator Ben Arbuckle headed to Oklahoma to be their new offensive coordinator. There was somebody else, another team that thought Utah. And Oklahoma probably put out more money for him, and because he can. They have a bigger program, and boy, do they need somebody to help them on offense.
And it depends, so what does that mean for John Mateer?
Yeah.
It depends on what, they decide to do about Jackson Arnold, who I really don't know, Craig, and you have a better perspective on this than me. I mean, just watching him, I'm not sure if it was his problem or the fact that they needed a better system, and they were, besieged by injuries doesn't even begin to cover what happened to that offense this year.
All I know is he's taking off running again. I mean, that's just what it feels like every time I watch him, is he's just always snap, take a couple steps back, take off running, because he doesn't have guys open, or because there's pressure, or because he just doesn't know what to do other than that. I don't know what the future holds for Jackson Arnold, but if they were to say, hey, Jackson, we're going to go a different direction, I think he'd probably be fine with that at this point, because he might be the one that broaches that conversation. He might be the one that says, hey, I'm looking for a different change in direction here. I don't know. I could see both parties walking away and being happy with that, but we'll see what Ben Arbuckle has to say. That was a name that was floating around. Utah, I saw some reports that they were actually favored, and it's hard to sort through all the BS on social media, so I don't know if that was people trolling or what, but I did see a couple posts that Utah maybe had the inside track on Ben Arbuckle, so clearly that wasn't the case, or Oklahoma made an offer there late and flipped the percentages. Whatever it was, I think they made a pretty good hire based on what we know about Ben Arbuckle. That was a name that seemed to excite a lot of people, and yeah, he did some fun things with John Mateer this year, so if Mateer wants to head to Norman and they feel like the Jackson Arnold era is not worth prolonging, then I think that would make a lot of sense. I don't know, how he fits in terms of his style, but I think he'd fit in pretty well in the SEC. Kind of Diego Pavia, kind of a little bit type of attitude, style, being able to run the ball. Just, I don't know. He's a fiery guy. I enjoyed watching him this year up in Pullman, and so yeah, he'd be an attractive guy to bring along as well. But if not, then
he's not in the portal yet either. So
yeah, if not, he'll have a lot of people coming after him. We haven't heard the last of John Mateer one way or the other.
Yeah.
Garrett, can we go straight to Weisner? Is that possible? I know you got a slideshow.
Let me run just down a list of some other transfers real quick while we're on this, so I don't miss them. Caden Salter, Liberty, plus 2 of their 2 best offensive linemen. They're in the portal, which I think might be an indicator of Jamie Chadwell might actually be getting his due. Well, we'll see.
But I think it's also an indicator that Caden Salter did not have a very good year at all. He followed up what was a banner year with an awful year, and plenty of people at Liberty who are glad to turn the page as well. So take that how you will. He's a talented player, but that was way off this year. Just that whole combination of Caden Salter and Liberty, that was really disappointing.
Yeah. Parker Jenkins, 4-star recruit last year for Houston, ran for 464 yards as a freshman. He is in the portal.
Miller Moss
is in the portal as well. I think he should go to Michigan, do 1 year at Michigan with what should be a pretty good group of skill players around him, and then make way for Bryce Underwood there. But Jordan White from Liberty's he's a center. He started his college career at West Virginia. He's a grad transfer. Xavier Gray, also there. New NC State linebacker Wyatt Wright, who was the top JUCO linebacker last year. Kansas State losing linebacker Cam Salas, who's from Kennedale, Texas. He was a freshman this year. Let's see. There's one other big name I wanted to say here, and there's been so many.
We can come back to it.
Yeah,
Craig,
so there's
you want to add anything to
lot,
there? Then we got to get to one or two more stories.
Yeah, I wanted to add on Parker Jenkins that it was interesting to see his trio of representatives in the tweet that Matt Zenit sent out, the 3 agents that he has for a guy who didn't even run for 500 yards this past year. It was just interesting to see his vast representation. But that's the era that we live in nowadays. So those people get shout-outs. I could do without that personally, but you got to, I guess, put out there who's representing these guys. So if people need to contact them, there's just, I guess, another way to go about it is they're their agents. But, yeah, that was just kind of a side-eye kind of odd thing for me to see was here's his 3 people representing him. It's like, what did he even do last year? I mean, I get it. The money's flowing, but just odd nonetheless.
Yeah. Okay, here are the 2 because they're related to Baylor. Zach Pyron, who's the backup at Georgia Tech, was committed to Baylor and
out
then
of
flipped.
Alabama.
And he is entering the portal with 2 years left as a grad transfer. Jake Gavzino, looking to play a 7th year, is transferring from UAB. 17-game starter, 5,025 total yards and 36 TDs over 3 seasons.
He's a guy who could play somewhere. I mean, he put up some pretty good numbers with at UAB, and I think he got hurt. And, of course, they were terrible. Trent Dilford. Is he still the head coach? I'm surprised that he hadn't been fired
He's
yet.
still the head coach.
Yeah.
Jalen Kitna's the quarterback there towards the end of the year. John Kitna's son, who was a Florida signee, and you can look into what happened there if you want to, but eventually landed at UAB, and he was the guy down the stretch. So good luck to Jacob. I mean, I thought he had a pretty good year last year, and this year was pretty disappointing for whatever reasons there were in play, like injuries, but it was disappointing nonetheless. So not sure what his market looks like, but good for him to give it one more go, I suppose.
I don't. Parker Jenkins, how many yards did you say he had, Paul?
464.
Okay, there must be in his first 6 games of the year, first 5 or 6 games of the year, he had 17 carries for 34 yards.
He had 34 yards this year.
Yeah, that's 17
464
carries
yards total.
Career in 2 years. 17 carries for 34 yards. And then this young man, we saw him when he was a pup. Contravan Weisner was known as Trey when he was at Waco at Conley High School. We did the games his sophomore year. Explosive. Transferred to DeSoto his senior year. He was absolutely freakish in that game against A&M when UT controlled both the offense and defensive lines and dominated that game. It was much the fact that it was 17-7 is weird because of a couple of crazy turnovers. He had himself a month. He had a big game against Kentucky. He was a skinny little kid that could run, and now he's into a grown man mode, and UT needed it because of the injuries on the offensive line.
You know, it's funny. During the game the other night, Chris Fowler was talking about Contravan Weisner, comparing to C.J. Baxter. He's like, not as highly touted or maybe not as – I'm like, yeah, but –
Baxter was a 5-star.
I was like, you guys, sometimes that stuff can be a little. You guys are now just seeing him play what we saw early on. So take your stars and shove them in a sack sometimes because we saw him. At the beginning of his career, and he had that kind of potential. And then he obviously left Conley, went to DeSoto. Where at DeSoto, a guy like Contravan Weisner, he's just another one of the dudes. So maybe you kind of fall into the pack there, but. Clearly showing that Texas can lose as many running backs as it can. Yeah. And they just had, they still had Jaden Blue and they still had Weisner. And Weisner, surprisingly to me, was the more accomplished of those two this year. But Blue is pretty damn good, too.
Jaden Blue still also. Both of them very good catching the ball out of the backfield, too.
First of all, that game was immensely disappointing from a competition standpoint. Like, all the pageantry and everything was great to see. The Kyle Field faithful and the Burnt Orange faithful showed up in droves, and all that was cool. I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point. But the actual game itself was pretty disappointing, even though A&M had a late spark that looked like it could maybe make it interesting, but it didn't really. And a big part of the reason why was because they couldn't stop Contravan Weisner on defense. He was amazing. You could have told me he was going to be a 5-star when we watched him as a sophomore. I would have totally believed that. I didn't keep track of him as much after we stopped covering their games other than just to see the numbers he kept putting up. And I still feel like he was a 5-star talent. So I don't know, how the analysts and all the people that do those rankings viewed it to where he was. But if you would have planted 5 stars next to his name as just a sophomore at Connolly, I would have been right there to vouch for that and defend that. And I'm not surprised at all, guys. I was surprised he wasn't playing more based on what we saw a couple years ago. I thought he was one of the best players I've ever seen at the high school level in terms of just being silky smooth and just gliding for yards and getting tough when he needed to. And I thought he was one of the better players I've ever seen, like I said. And so when he signed with Texas as an Oklahoma fan, I was like, damn it, man, because I know how good he is. And I'm sitting there watching it with my brother-in-law the other night, and we're talking about Jaden Blue and all these other guys. I'm like, Contravan Weisner's like that guy. Like, I don't care who else they've signed. I don't care what the stars next to their names are. Like, I've always been of the belief that's the dude right there. And I don't know what all came into play, just other talent in the room, injuries, whatever, that took a while for him to get to being like the bell cow guy, but he's pretty clearly like that guy now, and he has been for the last couple of games, and he's been amazing to watch, and I'm glad for him. He's a hell of a talent, and UT's got a really good one, as everybody across the country saw on Saturday night.
He is tough as nails. He wasn't early on because he was kind of frail. He's fast as the lightning, but he got stronger. And what was interesting, I shared this with those in the Earl Campbell committee last night real quickly, then we come back with Ari Temkin. He got beat up in a game against La Vega, and he didn't want to have another carry. And then about 2-3 weeks later, they played a game at China Spring, and he made a big play on defense and recovered a fumble. And from that point on, he also became a dude when it comes to physicality on either side of the football. When we come back, Ari Temkin. Later on, Jed Drenning on the coaching change at West Virginia. Phil Bennett, he didn't think that he kind of wondered about UT at times this year. They said, well, we're really good. And, man, were they good in that game at Kyle Field in College Station. This is 365 Sports. Petty Clinic, lowt.com. Dr. Kent Petty can help you become the high-performance man that you want to be, need to be, and as you get older, used to be. Father Time happens. It takes care of everybody in the end. But you also, as you get older, certain things, levels of whatever, that allow you to have energy or sex drive or stay focused and just be happy can drop. Like, for example, you lose your testosterone level. It starts to drop. It happens. It happens to 1 out of about every 3 or 4 men, and it's part of Father Time. Dr. Kent Petty can help you out. Contact him. PettyClinicLowT.com. And tell him you have symptoms that I just brought up, or even if it's one of them, multiple of them, and then he can set you up to get your blood work, take care of that appointment for you, and then get the results, the blood results that you give, and then contact you to let you know where your testosterone level might be, or is. Not might be, is. And it might be fine. And so then it's something else you got to deal with. But Dr. Petty can put you in a program to increase your testosterone levels at PettyClinicLowT.com.
Samuels in Waco is hosting an epic Black Friday sales event. For a limited time, get the powerful 2024 Ram 1500 with 0.9% financing for 72 months. Or the 2024 Jeep Gladiator for 2.9% financing for 72 months. Alan Samuels in Waco.
Our communities are facing unprecedented times. At Boozer's Jewelers, we care about you and your family. If you're like me, your home has unwanted or unused jewelry lying around. They can have value, and that means we can turn that jewelry into instant cash. This is a great way to get the most value from your unwanted jewelry. At Boozer's Jewelers, we buy all kinds of unused jewelry. So give us a call and let us give you peace of mind and cash for your unwanted or unused jewelry.
Developed by Startup Waco, a nonprofit organization, GXG is a program designed to support the entrepreneurial development of Baylor University student athletes through NIL activations. The program helps student athletes maximize their platforms and offers a comprehensive support system for them to create and grow new businesses that not only benefit themselves, but also uplift the local economy. Fans who wish to support student athletes can donate to GXG via the GXG NIL Fund, BaylorBears.com/GXG. Contributions to support NIL activations through GXG can be made at BaylorBears.com/GXG. For more information, follow at GXG_GreenXGold on social media and visit the official website www.gxg.startupwaco.com. GXG, empowering student athlete entrepreneurship and uplifting the local economy through NIL activations.
If you want quality and personalized service for all your air conditioning and heating needs, call Tradesman Services. They're a family-owned and operated company that has served Texans for over 30 years. Tradesman offers maintenance plans starting at just $12 per month and a free service call for all new customers. They're also experts in geothermal design, installation, and service. Visit them online at coolingwaco.com.
Another so-so pizza from So-So's Pizza? But wait, there's Marco's! Our new triple pepperoni Magnifico pizza is stacked with classic, crispy cupped, and new bold shredded pepperoni. It's triple the flavor, and only at Marco's. Just $11.99.
This is 365 Sports.
The 3 o'clock hour is sponsored by Waco Custom Marketplace. Meats, sweets, Texas treats, and a cut above the rest. 425 Lake Air Drive, Waco.
It is Big 12 Championship Week. It's Conference Championship Week for everybody that has a game, and everybody has a game because everybody makes money off of having those games. Ari Temkin, how you doing, man? Good to see you.
What's up, Smokey? How are you?
Doing well. We're here with everybody, and good to have you back on with us. And as everybody predicted at the start of the year, Iowa State might have been like something that nobody would have that's fine, but Arizona State did it. They're in the championship game, and they're 10-2.
Yeah, what a race to the finish line it was. You know, I was in Waco to see my Jayhawks lose to the Bears on Saturday at McLean Stadium. My first opportunity to go there. Probably won't be rushing to get back as the Jayhawks lost their 14th straight to Baylor, and I think they're 0-11 now in Waco. So that was fun. No, but I mean, watching Saturday night, Smokey, it was pretty wild. I mean, you had the K-State Iowa State game going to the wire. You know, if K-State wins that, then that opens the opportunity for BYU, who kicked off, at around 9:30 Central Time. And then obviously once Iowa State won, BYU couldn't get in, but needed to win in order to keep Iowa State in for the Big 12 championship game. Otherwise, Colorado would have gotten in. So, I think obviously with all the tiebreakers we were trying to work through over the course of the season, there were some weird ones, but it kind of, it kind of came to be pretty clean and cut and dried. So, it's when you look at the teams projected to be the top 5 of this conference before the season started, 4 of those 5 represent the 4 of the 5 worst teams in the Big 12, and the one that was the exception was Iowa State, who ends up in the Big 12 title game, and then Arizona State was picked by the media to be 16 out of 16 teams. So just an incredible season and turnaround for Kenny Dillingham and company at Arizona State this year.
What do you think about the matchup for this title game? No Jordan Tyson for Arizona State, which is that's gonna suck. That's for sure. But what else about this jumps out at you as matchups? These teams to me appear pretty similar.
Yeah, I mean the Jordan Tyson loss is huge. I don't want to understate that. For Arizona State over the last month plus, they've had a 3-headed monster on offense in Leavitt, Tyson, and Cam Scadaboo. So without Tyson, they're going to have to figure out who's going to emerge at the wide receiver position. But there's just so much that he does that opens up opportunities for Guillory and everybody else. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how what they try to do in the passing game. I mean, Arizona State went from being an elite running attack that could pass the ball at times to being a legitimate 2-headed monster on offense in terms of being able to pass and run, and that's really evolved for them over the last month of the season. So the loss of Tyson cannot be understated. Now, with that being said, Hines Ward is the wide receivers coach. And we did see some guys emerge against Arizona in the Territorial Cup. Now, with that being said, how much stock do you put into a game like that with Arizona, who looked completely checked out? And it was basically 35-0 or whatever it was coming out. So that game wasn't nearly close at all at any point. So it's tough to kind of take away from that, but you're hopeful that Hines Ward can figure out who else they can get on the field to kind of take up for that spot for Tyson, because they're just not as good of a football team without him. The other part, guys, and this is what impacts us living in Texas and certainly recruiting the state of Texas. Jordan Tyson, grew up in the Dallas area. It was brother who played at Texas Tech and is now in the NBA, played at John Paul II. So then you look at Xavier Alford, who's from the Pearland area in Houston, went to Shadow Creek and played in 2 consecutive state championship games at AT&T Stadium. So this is going to be his 3rd chance to play at Jerry World. A lot of Texans on this roster, guys. Arizona State under Brian Carrington have done a fantastic job of recruiting the state of Texas. They have this saying, from Texas to Tempe. Now they're going back, obviously, to Texas for this Big 12 championship game. So as I project this thing out, this spells bad news for us, for Baylor, for Texas Tech, for TCU, for Houston, for teams in the state in the Big 12, because Arizona State has done a really good job in recruiting our kids.
Matt Campbell, we know that the story there has been progressive building and good results, but not great results necessarily. First 10-win season in school history. Now the opportunity for the first Big 12 win in Big 12 championship win in school history. Just what do you make of the job that Matt Campbell has done with Iowa State, Ari?
What's up, Paul? I think I just saw Paul there.
Yeah, shout out to Paul.
Paul's being a handyman right now.
Always.
Yeah. And I fixed it, didn't I? Yeah.
All right. Good work, Paul.
Yeah.
No, Craig, look, it's nothing short of remarkable what Matt Campbell has done at Iowa State. I think for those of us that have been watching the Big 12 for the last decade, this isn't a surprise. But if you've been watching Iowa State football, this is shocking what he's able to do, what he's been able to do, and just build a consistent winner. It's funny. Last year, Iowa State lost a game to Ohio, and there was this unruly Iowa State fan that had this viral video of him saying that Matt Campbell was on the hot seat, and Campbell nearly lost his mind on this guy. And it's a good thing he didn't, because he shouldn't have wasted his breath worrying about this Iowa State fan who for some reason had no idea what he was talking about in terms of the history of Iowa State football. But it's all Matt Campbell. The first 10-win season in the history of Iowa State football, it had been Indiana, Iowa State, and Vanderbilt, and now it's just Vanderbilt, with Indiana and Iowa State both getting those 10-win seasons this year. They have not won a conference championship since 1912 when they were in the Missouri Valley Intercollegiate Athletic Association. So, it's been 112 years since they've won a conference championship. And, it's like every year Iowa State's in the running to do it. And, yeah, they've had some disappointing losses and they haven't finished things out, and they've had some really good teams that didn't get there. But this is what you do when you're as good of a head coach as Matt Campbell is. You always stay relevant, and you figure out a way that, even if you don't have – this isn't the most talented Iowa State team they've had, but they're always relevant. They're always at the top of the conference. And when you do that, you put yourself in position to win championships. And I think that's what we're seeing here. They played for the Big 12 championship in 2020. Here they are playing for it again with an opportunity to win it for the first time again in 112 years and go to the playoff with a team that, again, when you look defensively, they've had all kinds of issues all season. Kansas ran all over them in what was probably the lowest point of their season. But they've gotten guys healthy and gotten guys back at the linebacker position. I hope Malik Verdon will be available, as he's been a absolute stalwart for them in the back end of their defense all year. He didn't play on Saturday. So, this is, Craig, to your question, a testament to what Matt Campbell has done in terms of being a consistent winner. And this is just what you do when you're constantly at the top of the conference or fighting for the top of the conference is, you put yourself in position every year to be in position. And that's exactly what they've done here. Rocco Becht, I think, has been good, but not as good as maybe we thought he was coming into the year. He's had a lot of turnover issues. They've had a ton of pick sixes against them, and K-State should have had probably 1 or 2 in that game on Saturday. So that's one of the concerns I have for Iowa State in this game, but they do have an elite pass attack with Jalen Higgins and Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, 2 guys that are 1,000-yard receivers, the only college football program in the nation with 2,000-yard receivers this year. So I'm really looking forward to this game. I think, both teams are certainly not at full strength with the loss of Tyson, and then, the injuries that Iowa State has sustained. So we'll see how this thing goes on Saturday at AT&T Stadium.
How many teams in the SEC would be a part of the college football playoff standings if they would only count the hypothetical wins?
Most of them, right?
Yeah, they'd be,
if not all of them.
Yeah, there would be at least 9, because then you have 3 other conference champions.
The thing we talked about today, Smokey, on Big 12 Radio, and I encourage people, if you've not yet already checked it out, to download the TuneIn app and check out Big 12 Radio from 7 to 10 a.m. Every weekday morning, 8 to 11 Eastern time. This is a lot more of a top-heavy conference than everybody expected, and even in terms of perception, where we talk about parity, anybody can win this league, and it's just so wide open. And I mean, 9 bowl-eligible teams, Kansas and Cincinnati both on Saturday had a chance to make it 11, but they both lost, and so now on the outside looking in. 9 of 16 teams are bowl-eligible, okay? But go further than that. 8 Big 12 teams have at least 8 wins. 3 with 10 wins, 1 with 9, 4 with 8 wins. So, I mean, it's a lot more top-heavy than I think a lot of people expected. This speaks to the level of the conference, right? Like, the conference was thought to be a league of parity, a bunch of 6-6, 7-5 teams, and yet the worst of the Big 12 from a bowl eligibility standpoint is 8 wins, and that's a big laundry list of teams with Baylor and TCU and Texas Tech that are there at 8 wins. So to me, 3 teams at 10 wins. I mean, this is not as parity-ridden of a conference as we expected. This is a much more top-heavy conference than what we expected. So I think that should wash out in terms of the rankings. I don't think there's any question the Big 12 should have 2 playoff teams. They're not going to, right? They're seemingly barely going to have 1. And at this point, Boise's ahead of them, which is crazy to me. I mean, we literally have an example, and I can't remember if we talked about this last week, but we have 3 examples of teams that were at the top of the American Athletic Conference that once they moved to the Big 12, the competition ratcheted up a lot more for them, and they're not as good. There's one bowl opportunity for all 3 of those teams in 2 seasons. Houston's 0-2, UCF is 1-2, and Cincinnati's 0-2 in terms of getting to a bowl. Those were 3 teams at the top of the American Athletic Conference. So we have this literal example of what happens when you move up in terms of conference competition relative to the Mountain West, the American Athletic Conference, and these other ones, how difficult it is. We're seeing UCF struggle to do it. UCF barely lost any games at home. Now they're a 500 club in program in the Big 12 with their head coach leaving to become the offensive coordinator at Florida State, right? So, like, it's just crazy to me how we have this real life world example of what happens when you move up in conference play. And yet the Mountain West is viewed at the same level as the Big 12. It's insane. We have this literal example of how difficult it is to move up in conferences, and they're not using it as an example.
Ari, and look, the SEC's been on their full push this week Ole Miss was also the wrong messenger, because Nick Saban and Lane Kiffin both make comments of it like, if we were in this conference or if Ole Miss was in the Big 12, you're telling me this. Well, Ole Miss has lost its last 3 games that they've played against Big 12 opponents, and not in oops-a-daisy, we had a weird game fashion. They've been thumped in all 3 of those games that they've played. This is now a parity situation in college football. Sure, the SEC is still on the top, but they're not like, this isn't Jordan versus the world. This is Jordan versus Malone now.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, and I don't know what is the cause of it. Maybe it's the transfer portal, maybe it's NIL, maybe it's the 12-team playoff. It makes me sick to hear Nick Saban and others question what Arizona State or BYU or Iowa State would do in the SEC. Number one, I mean, that's a loaded question, because what schedule are they looking at, right? I mean, there's how many different versions of the same SEC schedule, because you're not going to play every team. And that's also not the point of this exercise, right? If it's what would your record be in the SEC, are we going to play that game with the ACC? Are we playing that game with the Big Ten? It's foolish. I mean, aside from the fact that you could lay it out, and the Big 12 has a pretty positive record versus the SEC in head-to-head matchups, but that doesn't even matter here. The point of the exercise is not to decide how good a team would be in that conference, right? It is, how good are you in your conference, and then how does that translate to success in the postseason? It's disturbing, because everything goes back to the playoff. Guys, I'll be honest. I was kind of surprised to not see a full McLean Stadium on Saturday. It was not full at all. The upper bowl was not full. No. This is a 7-win team going for 8 wins and having a really good season where they're the number 1 offense last month of the season in college football. To me, this is a symptom of what's happening in college football. Now I get it. People are on Thanksgiving break, whatever. But like, if you're not playing for the playoff, it's like nothing matters anymore. It used to be a big deal if you won 9 games in a season. It used to be a big deal when you beat your rival in a season. It used to be a big deal when you beat all the Texas teams in the season. You know what I mean? Like, these things used to matter, and now it's like less and less they matter because of the way we talk about these things from a national perspective and how it relates to playoff. It's ridiculous. And it's not just Baylor. I think we see it a lot of places where it's like the fanfare, you're just not showing up in the same way that you used to, especially if you're, quote unquote, not in the playoff chase. And it's like I couldn't believe my eyes at the game on Saturday. And again, this isn't a knock at Baylor. It's just the way the things are right now. It's like if you're not playing for a spot in the playoff, it's almost as if it doesn't matter. And it's like, this is such, there used to be so many different ways you could win your season in college football. And it's like, those are all dwindling. And I get it. You want to get to the playoff. You want to win playoff games. Everybody wants that. But it's, if your entire lot in life in success in sports is tied to that and tied to a panel of people that have no idea what they're talking about, and they're completely, blinded by their own preconceived perceptions of this conference, it's foolish.
Ari, you mentioned that Baylor-Kansas game. My goodness, man, what a result for the Bears that I did not see coming in any way, shape, or form. A win, sure, but a blowout win in that fashion, I don't think many were expecting that. KU was favored, going into Waco, slightly favored. But just your thoughts on what you saw. I mean, that was a screeching halt for the Jayhawks, but they made a hell of a run there in the second half. Season's over, obviously, and the beat goes on for Dave Aranda and company.
And this is where, like, context matters here. Like, Kansas played a really tough schedule. They end up the season 5-7. Not all 5-7s are created equal. Like, there's a lot of bad teams in this conference, some at 4-8. But, I mean, Kansas is a much better team than the 5-7 record would indicate. Now, on Saturday, we saw a lot more of what we had seen previous in the season, which is turnovers and the inability of the Kansas defense to get stops. Now, I credit Baylor's offense for the inability of Kansas's defense to get stops, because it's not just Kansas that Baylor did this against. They've been doing this against other defenses for, the entire, basically last 5 weeks. Number 1 offense in college football last 5 weeks of the season. I've been enamored with what Sawyer Robertson has done with all the different weapons they have at running back. I mean, it was kind of funny how easy it was for Baylor's offense. For me, the biggest surprise was Kansas's offense that couldn't get out of its own way. Jalen Daniels threw another pick. They had a fumble trying to go into the end zone, late in the first half that would have, I think, really cut into that Baylor lead. They just could not get out of their own way, and turnovers were a huge catalyst for this. I credit basically Baylor's offense and Kansas's, turning the football over for that loss on Saturday. But yeah, I mean, context is important here. I mean, that's a big win for Baylor because Kansas was surging. They'd won 3 straight against top 25 opponents, needed one more win to get to bowl eligibility, and completely got turned away, which is something that had not been done to them, last month of the season. Even in the loss to K-State earlier in this, a month ago, they should have won the game and were in position to win it, but K-State kicks the game-winning field goal. So that's just kind of the way the season went for Kansas. They put together a really, really good month stretch there, but wasn't enough to get them to bowl eligibility, and their season ends at 5-7. I still have all the confidence in the world in Lance Leipold. I do wonder if he'll make changes with Jeff Grimes at offensive coordinator and then, at defensive coordinator. But yeah, pretty wild. Kansas had an opportunity to make real history on Saturday. They'd never won in Waco before, and Kansas has never been bowl eligible in 3 consecutive seasons. So they had a chance to do both of those on Saturday and couldn't. And so now it's once again 2 straight years of bowl eligibility for Kansas, and they have not ever in their history been bowl eligible 3 straight seasons. How wild is that?
It is, and they had the lead 7-0, missed a field goal before that, and actually started well. By the way, next week after we know who's going to represent the Big 12 and whatever happens with the standings, the teams that were in the mix at the top level of the Big 12, I had, me personally, Colorado ranked 11th, Baylor 12th, BYU 15th, and Arizona State 16th in my media poll. And I bet I'm not alone with a lot of that. I had Iowa State 7th, which is not that high itself. I just blanked the bed like I did the year before. I'm going to stop doing them.
Yeah, we all had Arizona State at 16. I mean, I had Houston and Arizona State as the two worst teams in the conference. I had West Virginia winning the conference. So, obviously they didn't finish as poorly as Oklahoma State or Utah or Kansas, as many others predicted. But yeah, it continues to be a fool's errand. I remember saying with a bunch of people before the season started, like, the one thing we know for sure is Utah is not going to win the conference. And that's just because the favorite doesn't seem to win this conference year in and year out. Like, that's it. So whoever is predicted to be the favorite next year, just know there's a good chance they're not going to win the conference.
Yep.
Because
Absolutely.
That's just the way that this conference goes. Now, with that being said, this conference needs consistency at the top. I mean, that's part of this perception issue that it has is every year, if you're going to have surprise teams, number one, we know that plays into how they're ranking them. So the fact that Arizona State and BYU were unranked before the season started has hurt them in the AP poll and therefore has hurt them in the playoff rankings. If Oklahoma State and Utah were doing what BYU and Arizona State are doing, they'd be much higher in the rankings. So, and maybe Arizona State's a team that could be consistent, but, we were looking for consistency out of TCU after they won, got to the Big 12 championship, or rather got to the college football playoff. We were looking for consistency, every year, it seems like, from these programs at the top of the conference, and we haven't seen it yet. And that's the biggest thing in terms of a long-term, perception issue for the Big 12 is getting consistency at the top of the conference.
Ari, a couple of coaching changes. Neil Brown, the straw that broke the camel's back maybe on Saturday with the blowout loss to Texas Tech, he's out. Mountaineers need a head coach, as does UCF, with Gus Malzahn taking the OC job in Tallahassee. Your thoughts? I mean, not surprising, right, that those jobs are changing. Wouldn't necessarily have predicted it last week, but what do you make of both?
Yeah, my guess is that Gus Malzahn knew that he was going to be out, which is the reason he took the preemptive take of going to Florida State for the offensive coordinator job. I just don't buy that Malzahn left the sitting head coaching job at UCF to be the offensive coordinator at Florida State, especially given where Florida State is. Mike Norvell's got to win next year, otherwise he's out too. So I definitely thought as the way the season was trending towards the end that UCF would probably be looking for a new head coach, and so I don't buy that Malzahn, was going to continue to be there and left on his own accord. I think he knew the writing was on the wall and he tried to find a good landing spot. With Neil Brown, I think the comments that he made a couple of months ago where he was, basically talking about, hey, come to the game and have some fun. Like, regardless of the truth behind the words that he said and the context, like, it just didn't matter. The optics of it were so bad. And I think this was a fan base that was so apathetic towards him that there was just no way that they couldn't let go of Neil Brown. Neil Brown's been a 500 coach at West Virginia. I think there were times where it looked like they could be, trending on the upward trajectory, but it just didn't happen. He won all of the games he was expected to, lost a few of those, and then could not punch up. Could not beat the teams that he needed to beat, like a Penn State or a Texas or an Oklahoma, when teams were ranked ahead. I think he was 0 for when it came to games against top 25 opponents. It'll be interesting to see. I think West Virginia is a really tough place in the Big 12 because there's such a geographic outlier. You look at Arizona and Arizona State, they've got each other, regionally, Colorado and Utah, right? So West Virginia is just such a geographic outlier. It's so difficult because the fan base only really checks in on those regional games, the West Virginia Pitt game, the West Virginia Penn State game. Those games mean so much more to the fans than West Virginia Baylor, or West Virginia Kansas, or even West Virginia UCF or Cincinnati. So that's just a tough job. I have seen that Andy Kotelnicki, they're interested in talking with him, the former Kansas offensive coordinator. I'm a big Kotelnicki fan in terms of offensive design. I love what he brings to the table, but curious if he could oversee a program in that capacity. But you want a proven program guy. You want a guy that can come in, that can placate to the fans, that placates the right people, that can play the game a little bit better than I think Neil Brown played it, because Brown came in with the right attitude, but I think over time he just lost a lot of his allies and just didn't win enough football games. But I also look at this and say, all right, we took before the season ended 3.5 was the over under in terms of new coaches in the Big 12. And I think I sit here today still taking the under, but it'd be very interesting to see how the rest of this plays out. I don't know that Satterfield is completely set at Cincinnati. I think they're going to take a long, hard look at that. And, you wonder if there's openings elsewhere that might attract some sitting head coaches in the Big 12. I'll still take the under at 3.5, but pretty close there, and I still think it's yet to be decided entirely.
Great stuff, Ari. Thank you very much for your feedback, opinion, and all of that above. Not everybody believes in what we say sometimes on the show, but we have opinions. We appreciate yours, and we'll see you next Monday. We'll know who's going to represent the Big 12, and also what else happens with the rest of the conference or the standings.
Appreciate you guys. Take care.
Thank you. Ari Temkin with us from Big 12 radio on TuneIn. Every Monday at about 3:40. And, of course, we have Jed Drenning on West Virginia, Neil Brown out at 4:30 today. When we come back, we'll get to a couple of more notes, a couple of comments from Dave Aranda, who has a potty mouth after the win against Kansas. It's kind of interesting to see a guy like that, and he is not afraid to pretty much admit how he talks to sometimes the coaches and or himself. This is 365 Sports. The Baylor Club, Mike Mosel, the general manager, memberships available, would be a really good stocking stuffer for Christmas. The amenities of the Baylor Club, they were locked up, and I'm talking about this, had so much going on during the game. During halftime, there's a lot of times during halftime of home games, I'll walk down to the Grant Taft suite and say hi to Coach Taft and others. This time, because of the Baylor Club and their sponsorship of our show, I went down and just kind of looked around. Lots of people, lots of food, a lot of people having fun, talking about whatever it might have been. Who knows, maybe mahjong to the game itself. But they have tremendous amenities. The food is fantastic. 2 fantastic chefs. They have tasting parties to make sure you understand some of the new food on the menu and whether you like it or not, and maybe give them some feedback. Plus, the Baylor Club, of course, is a place where you can hold major events if you have a banquet, a dinner, a rehearsal dinner, or maybe just something like a fundraiser or something else like that. Inside McLean Stadium, memberships available. It's the Baylor Club inside McLean Stadium off I-35.
Hi, I'm Mark Stewart with Bird Colgan Ford. It's that time of year, it's football season. Bird Colgan Ford is a proud supporter of the best high school football right here in Central Texas. BK Ford is proud to sell the #1 selling truck in Texas, the F-Series truck, 47 years in a row. Come see the largest showroom in Texas and experience better at Bird Colgan Ford.
Established in 2007 and independently owned, Alliance Bank Central Texas is committed to helping families and businesses meet their financial goals. From their tellers to their board of directors, they know the importance of superior service and competitive products. Customers have confidence knowing that their financial needs are in good hands. It's your bank, Alliance Bank Central Texas, with 2 Waco locations, 4721 Bosque Boulevard and 191 Archway Drive on Highway 84, and at alliancebanktexas.com. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
It's football and tailgate season. If you want product for the grill or smoker, charcoal, seasonings, marinades, sauces, Waco Custom Marketplace is your home to help prep, cook, and enjoy your food. Tailgate must-like brisket, tri-tip, fresh-made burgers, sausage, chicken wings, and if you want steaks, call in your order and pick them up. Bacon wrap fillets or any kind of ribeyes. USDA Select, Choice, and Prime that melt in your mouth. House-made sausage and jerky. Also, Waco Custom Marketplace, a one-stop shop for tailgating, barbecue, cook-offs, and family get-togethers, fundraisers with fair prices to you, the customer. A bakery with fresh baked bread and kolaches. There's cold beer, wine, and soft drinks. Serving Waco restaurants and families since 1940. A cut above the rest. Waco Custom Marketplace, open Monday through Saturday at 425 Lake Air Drive in Waco.
Pizza, burgers, and Bears football. There's no place around Waco that serves them all other than Bubba's 33. Come show your green and gold and enjoy some of Waco's best food and beverages while watching your favorite team, the Bears. When real Bears fans get hungry, Bubba's 33 is the #1 spot for ice-cold drinks, hand-stretched, stone-baked pizzas, and bacon-infused burgers. Join us for indoor or patio dining. Bubba's 33, Waco's restaurant and proud supporter of Baylor Bears football. Sick 'em, Bears.
This is 365 Sports. Text us at 254-339-1122. The text line is sponsored by Riverbend Liquor and Wine, with the most extensive variety of craft beer in Waco. A hidden gem on Lakeshore Drive and 19th Street.
All right, here we go. 365 Sports. Appreciate your time. Hope you had a chance to veg out and decompress. We will get into more of what happened over the weekend with some of the games that occurred, and what was a little bit of a man. How about the flag planting fiascos that were going on over the weekend? We've seen that in Texas OU forever as part of the deal, but it went all over the place. We'll get to those.
And when we do, I got into it a little bit. I kind of stepped in it with some Florida fans.
Yeah, you did.
But I didn't realize this is where I thought maybe that fan base would understand that I'm a podcaster who's had an opinion about this, that it's very middle of the road. They took it as I was talking about them, and I thought
you did. I did when I saw your tweet. I said, this is going to end up being a cat fight. So here's Dave Aranda on kind of what kick-started this run of Baylor winning, which seemed to be impossible, but it is now remarkable, a 6-game winning streak.
Dave, what was the impetus that got y'all to this point in terms of, you mentioned it, to turn it around like you did? I mean, what do you feel like was the biggest thing?
I think it's probably a year ago, this game. It was back in, November or December. I think it was then, and I think everyone knew we had a good team. I know that we can point to the 2 and 4. I think that's easy to do. But I think everybody felt like, we're being buried, but we're still alive. It's hard to breathe when they're putting dirt on you. You know what I mean? And so to get some oxygen and to breathe a little bit, I think you look at Devin Bobby and is a great example of it. So Devin has the opportunity to make picks, and he drops them, and now all of a sudden he's grabbing picks out of the air all over the place. And so that's just the power of belief and the power of being positive. It's cool to see.
By the way, Devin Bobby was our post-game show segment, and he was really good after the win against Kansas. And then Aranda and his knowledge and what he's built his resume on when it comes to defense. But yet again, Baylor initially looked like they were going to give up a bunch of yards and maybe a lot of points. Listen to what he was saying during the game, even when Baylor was having success when it comes to the scoreboard.
I don't know how much you care about yards, but defense obviously gave up some yards, but getting 3 turnovers, a 4th down stop, another stop that they didn't make the field goal on. How big was that for them to kind of maybe bend but don't break?
Yeah, it's really big. I think somewhere in there I was losing my mind on the sidelines, and I feel bad for our defensive coaches. They have to listen to me, but I was just saying, man, it's almost like we're destined to give up 30 points a game. I think we can play somewhat decently. And offensively, we score so fast. And, I get to the sidelines on defense, and everybody's smiling, and they're happy. And it's like, you shouldn't, effing be happy right now. You need to be effing pissed off. What? And it's like, this came up too in 2019 at LSU. This was the similar problem. And so you have to play your best up 20 points in the 3rd quarter. And so it just goes against basically human nature to do that. And we've failed pretty strong in that area. You look at all these games that we haven't closed out. And so the 4th down stop was a little bit of a win. So we'll take it.
Yeah, Kansas' first drive went down, missed a field goal. Second drive went down, scored. Then they had another field goal, but they were moving it up. They had over 400 yards, but it was a lot of hidden stuff along the way.
Yeah, Kansas was super hot coming in, and Baylor just smacked them around throughout majority of that game. Kansas did move the ball, like you said, early on, had some opportunities, but missed that field goal, and they didn't have a whole lot to really keep up with the Bears throughout most of that game. Jalen Daniels turns the ball over, and it really seemed like they pretty easily spotted kind of what KU was looking to do and had great game prep throughout the week, weren't caught off guard by anything, and if anything, kind of saw through what Jeff Grimes was trying to do. As they mentioned in the postgame, it was a certain look that they said is like, look to see if, I don't know, it was something about, because I saw it in passing, it was something about just the wide receivers, but they had kind of decoded some of what they were trying to do on offense, and that helped them limit what KU was hoping to do. So I was really impressed. I was really caught off guard by how well they played, because I don't know, probably didn't give them the benefit of the doubt that I give everybody else because I'm too close to it. So I typically go away the opposite direction rather than leaning into that. I go the opposite, and that was not the right decision here because we've seen how well they played. They deserve the respect to think that they'd be able to beat a team that's in the same kind of ranking as them, the same sort of tier as them, and to be at home, even though there wasn't a great crowd. I mean, that's kind of the norm, and you're sort of used to not always having it be like jam-packed and crazy, so I don't think that affected them all that much, and should have given them more benefit of the doubt, but didn't, and was pleasantly happy to be wrong for their sake because it turned out to be a great win.
It was. The defense did make plays. They had a couple of turnovers, as you mentioned. Daniels was picked, Evan Bobby a couple of times, and they win the game. Now, Dave Aranda's job was on the line even at the end of last year before the season ended. Mack Rhoades took holy hell, scorched earth, because he did not fire Dave Aranda. Not everybody. There's some that wanted to see how it worked out. Then 2-4. I mean, I've read the comments. I wondered whether or not Aranda would survive. My minimum was you better go 7-5 or better. Well, they went 8-4. And they are on a roll. And I'm telling you, some of you, and you know who you are, and I'm not saying you were wrong, felt like this should have been a coaching change. And now a year later, what has Dave Aranda learned about his growth as a head coach?
Dave, you mentioned that sometimes it's more of an art than a science. Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I take you as more of a scientist than an artist. Mm-hmm. How much growth have you made as a head coach? Mm-hmm. I mean, over the course of this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a couple cycles of all of that. I think the growth has been exhausting, But I think it's important because I think the game is changing, I think if you just look at the schematics, just what offensively we saw today from Kansas, there was never an offense. We just saw a bunch of unbalanced, trick plays, motions, all these other things. There wasn't one team in 2019 that did that. And so the game is completely different now, too, But then I think with whether it's what you got to do for recruiting, what you've got to do, I guess, to be cool, what you've got to do to win in a really, really competitive environment takes change, and it takes you looking in the mirror.
Mack Rhoades, I remember asking him when he decided he was going to keep Dave Aranda, what happens if it doesn't work out? And he kind of had a smart-ass remark, which I thought showed it won't be the first time, right? It won't be the first time. And then they start 2-4. And what a really, from the hot seat, hell, he was inside of an oven, one of those ovens you see at a great Italian restaurant that goes inside the stone. Guys, what he's done, what this team has done, we've discussed it a little bit, but we didn't kind of backed off to see how it would end. Whatever they do in the bowl game, the amount of players they have coming back, where they are now with their NIL, where they are with the momentum, they got to protect some players, they got to protect some coaches, but man, night and day from this time a year ago.
Well, I always had the feeling that because I do think that Dave Aranda is one of those guys who hasn't even realized his full potential yet, and he's got all of that one of the things that Mack Rhoades had to be telling himself is, okay, I'm going to fire this guy because everybody tells me to, even though I believe in him, and I think we can do it right if we can just get together on what did we do wrong, and we can all agree on that and move forward, which they did. The biggest thing I just always felt was Dave Aranda is going to get fired at Baylor after a couple of mediocre to bad years, and then he's going to kick around for a little bit, figure it out, and then one day we're going to watch him hoisting a trophy for another team because he did figure it out. And, kudos to Mack Rhoades for sticking with it, and kudos to Dave Aranda for at 2-4, realizing what was wrong with the team that they believed to be pretty good and turning the light on where it needed to be turned on.
Yeah, I mean, I give Dave Aranda a lot of credit for being adaptable. I mean, he had to be, though. Like, that's the thing. I give Mack Rhoades credit, but also at the same time, like, he needed it to work out. So, he's the one that put that big contract with the big buyout in front of Dave Aranda back after 2021. And so both sides needed to work out. And I don't know how much of a choice you had to stick with it or not. Like you had to let it play out and see how it went. And who knows, had they won a couple less games, what that would have looked like on Mack Rhodes' desk. But, yeah, there was pressure building there early in the year. I thought it was silly to be calling for his job at 2-4, but that was the direction that they were heading, and certainly you were setting yourself up for that conversation. I just thought it was kind of moronic to do, like, no, we got to do it like right now. It's like, what good would that do? It would do absolutely no good to jump out 6 weeks into the season and start a head coaching search. So I just felt like that was overreactionary. I'm glad, though, that we didn't have to see that be the trend for the last 8 weeks of the season where that was what all the talk was. Instead, that type of talk got flipped on its head as they just reeled off win after win after win to the point of like, oh, damn, he's not only going to be back, like they're setting up for maybe a pretty great run. And winning 6 straight to close it out, have a possibility at 7, have a possibility at 9 wins. 8-5 would be a good mark. 9-4 would be tremendous. But either way, it's a huge bounce back, and there is a lot of reason to believe that next year could be great. Now, at the same time, there's a lot of transfer portal between now and then. There's a lot of NIL between now and then. There's a lot of coaching changes between now and then. So it's hard to say what exactly this team's going to look like in August. I mean, no matter how good and cheery and rosy and everything does seem to be, but still, it does seem like it's in a really good spot with a lot of guys who like being here and fit the Dave Aranda mold. And I think Dave Aranda fits Baylor really well. And I think that for his shortcomings, the offense isn't sexy enough. Well, it is now. It's like the best offense in America over the last 6 weeks, legitimately the best offense in America. So you've got all your flash and dash. He's not going to be like the king of style. He never will be, but all of the other things are fallen into place, and I think he's got a good grasp on their identity now and his identity and the program and what it needs to be and what it needs to look like and who they need to have in it. And so I'm excited to see what they're able to do with it because unlike in 2021 when they just dropped the ball and didn't really react to their success, they know better now.
Yep.
And they will react to the success, and I expect them to carry that momentum into National Signing Day in a couple of days, and I expect them to carry that throughout the offseason because now the We Pay Players thing really set them up for some jokes this time of year if they wouldn't have followed through on that. And early on in the season, that looked like it was going to be a big joke of We Pay Players. Instead, it's something you throw back out there this time of year and you go, no, yeah, reminder, we pay players. Oh, yeah, and we also went 8-4. We're going to go to a pretty good bowl game as well. And, there's the part about if you just defend that Hail Mary, you're in the Big 12 championship game. I mean, so I'm not going to what if it to death, but, yeah, there's a lot to be excited about right now and the trajectory of the program and the direction under Dave Aranda, which is not something we could have said a couple months ago.
Yeah, he took his staff and also the coverage of his team, and it wasn't always popular. I saw Ashley Hodge write about this earlier over the weekend. He basically went underground. The access to him is what some coaches, you get them on Monday, and they may do a coaches show somewhere at a local business later in the week. Not a lot of interviews, not on this show one time during season. Coaches aren't available. Whatever we want, that doesn't matter. Whatever he could do to turn that table, turn that tide, he did, plus what Mack Rhodes and the rest of the department gave what he needed. And now they get a little bit of a break, and like you said, in a couple of days, they're going to have, for Baylor, a very nice signing class.
We'll see if there's any surprises, but, they may have some up their sleeve as well. So I know they had a couple guys that were, kind of teetering, like Oregon was playing heavy on Caleb Burns and guys like that. So we'll see how they close. But, it's going to be a fun offseason based on what we know right now, and it could have been the complete opposite if things had held course following the Iowa State game. I have to mention this before we go. We got something?
No.
It looks like Zack Kitley to Western Kentucky to become their new head coach is basically official. FAU, excuse me. God, he's from Western Kentucky. It looks like Zack Kitley as FAU's next head coach is basically all but a done deal because every college football reporter in America now is on this and saying basically as much. So, he is going to be leaving the Red Raiders, it appears, and has some extensive ties there, obviously, with his father. But, Zack Kitley looks like he'll be the next FAU head coach. So Joey McGuire will need coordinators on both sides of the ball, new on both sides next year.
Yeah, he knows offense. Not everybody agrees with what he knows about offense. I know Texas Tech fans are like, give and take on Kitley, and also with DeRuyter, there was no give and take. They wanted him gone. One final note, then we break. We come back with Jed Drenning. Sam Pittman will return as the head coach at Arkansas. There were thoughts that he might retire, but he comes back with another year with the Razorbacks.
And Brent Brennan in Arizona is also coming back for sure.
All right, that was
very.
If you watch Jason Shear's timeline the last 3 or 4 weeks, I didn't know what was going to happen with him.
Yeah, I just don't think you can fire a coach after 1 year if you're Arizona football. I'm sorry, but I mean, I know as much of an odd puzzle piece fit as it might be, I don't know. So the next guy's going to roll in and be like, man.
Here's what I want. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. No one knows. I mean, what if Mack Rhodes would have fired Dave Aranda? Who knows who would they have hired? Well, I mean, we don't know if West Virginia's making the right decision. That's up to Ren Baker to see. But it takes time, and it's just to me part of the deal. So much money involved that there are coaching staff changes that I think sometimes you just have to bite your lip and wait another year.
Well, I just think financially, I don't know that you're in the best position to go and I don't know what his buyout is, but regardless. So the next head coach is going to roll in and be like, so I've got maybe a year before you guys fire me if Brent Brennan is precedent now. So I just don't know what kind of a message that would send to your future head coach if you're dumping on a guy after only 1 year. So we'll see. He deserves at least a second season to try and have an off season like Dave Aranda just had to try and regroup and see what they can do. But, yeah, if not better next year, then that certainly seems like the top of the list of the coaching carousel will be in Tucson.
Jed Drenning, sideline analyst for West Virginia Radio. He's next. Craig Smoak, Paul Catalina. I'm David Smoak. We're all back together after a little decompression time during the holidays. And this is 365 Sports. TexasBeefHouse.com. They have a new auction coming up. It will be on Wednesday, starts at 6 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, and runs through 6 o'clock Central Time on Thursday. It's a stake sale, and they already have all the lots. There's let me see how many lots they have that are up for sale, up in the hundreds, a bunch, a ton of them, 80 now, 91 different lots, and you have anything from ground hamburger beef to hamburger patties. You even have Wagyu shank bones if that's what you want to use, or stew meat, soup bones. This is some new stuff. Roast. Let me see here. Tri-tip, flank steak. And then, of course, you have the fillets and the Angus cattle raised on the ranch at TexasBeefHouse.com in between Tyler and White House in East Texas. And then you have the New York strip. And, yes, you have those delicious ribeyes, too. So there are many lots, tons and tons of steaks that will be a part of the auction. Starts 6 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, runs through the end of the day, 6 o'clock that night on Thursday. And tell them, Sikkim 365 Sports, and you get a discount on what you're going to buy as well. If you tell them you watch this show, tell Samantha that. It's 365 Sports, great sponsor of the Top 5, TexasBeefHouse.com.
Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, the team physicians for Baylor Athletics, diagnosing and treating all sports-related injuries, including concussions. These specialists also provide orthopedic services for athletes and non-athletes alike, whether it's knee or shoulder pain, a wrist injury, orthopedic spine care, and even an arthritis and total joint clinic. Trust the doctors Baylor Athletics trust. Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics wants to get you back in the game.
Ready to take your business to the next level? Carrion Solutions has got you covered. We deliver world-class IT consulting, including Quest On Demand and Migration Manager, M365 and Exchange migrations, Active Directory assessments, security hardening, and Windows Server upgrades. Our experts specialize in consulting, monitoring, support, and managed IT services. We promise vision, professionalism, and unbeatable value. Satisfaction guaranteed. If you're not happy, we make it right. Remember the name Carrion Solutions. For more info, email sales@carrionsolutions.com or visit carrionsolutions.com. That's CARRION solutions.com. Carrion Solutions IT success guaranteed.
To
Developed by Startup Waco, a nonprofit organization, GXG is a program designed to support the entrepreneurial development of Baylor University student-athletes through NIL activations. The program helps student-athletes maximize their platforms and offers a comprehensive support system for them to create and grow new businesses that not only benefit themselves, but also uplift the local economy. Fans who wish to support student-athletes can donate to GXG via the GXG NIL Fund, BaylorBears.com/GXG. Contributions to support NIL activations through GXG can be made at BaylorBears.com/GXG. For more information, follow at GXG_GreenXGold on social media and visit the official website www.gxg.startupwaco.com. GXG, empowering student-athlete entrepreneurship and uplifting the local economy through NIL activations.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
The 4 o'clock hour is sponsored by Boozer's Jewelers, the wedding ring store, specializing in custom jewelry and repair, all in-house.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
365 Sports on this Monday. We appreciate those of you watching us, whether it's on YouTube at 365 Sports. Our Twitter feed has those of you watching at 365 Sports YT, and of course the app at Sikkim 365 app. We're joined by sideline analyst and also writes a lot about West Virginia, analyst for them. Jed Drenning joins us, our go-to guy with the Mountaineers. Jed, did they make the right decision, and did they do it at the right time?
I think at this juncture it was probably a necessary decision. In large measure, sometimes these things come down to energizing the fan base, and the fan base wants an opportunity to be competitive. And it's not as though we were a bad football team for the last 5 years. We've just been a serviceable, middle-of-the-pack football team. And that's not what West Virginia fans anticipate. Now, you could argue there's been some hardship that needed to be overcome, and we just weren't able to overcome it. But, we're trying to work our way coming out of this NIL deficit and things of that nature. And I do think that some of that is in sight. Some progress is in sight. So whoever takes the job next might find themselves gradually in more competitive surroundings on that front. And that's where everything's been working for the last couple of years, is trying to get that right. We got the trust in order. So the roster attrition wasn't what it was a handful of years ago. That was somewhat stabilized. You wanted to do everything you could to give Neil Brown and the staff a legitimate puncher's chance to be competitive. And so as we did those things, this was a football team that just couldn't get over the hump. Again, not a bad team. We hovered around 500. We won 9 games last year, by and large competitive until the season finale this year. Is just against those better teams on the schedule and in the Big 12. We kept finding ways to let it slip away in the late going, whether it was the Kansas State game because we were banged up in the second half, the Iowa State game, who made plays against us in the fourth quarter that we didn't make. We kept finding ways to drop those games that could have helped us continue moving up instead of down. And I think as a result, at this juncture, they decided, look, now's the time to make the change. You're going into this rev share deal next year where everything's kind of reinvented yet again. So this is probably the optimal time to try and do that.
Jed, I was just curious, if that Texas Tech game goes differently, do you think the decision is still made, or was that kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, the fashion in which they lost that game?
You could definitely argue that. You could definitely argue that because, again, when you look at the nature of how this season has gone, we were picked to finish 7th in the Big 12. Obviously, it didn't turn out that way. But if you win that football game, you're at 7-5 with some tough losses against some really good teams, potentially on your way to an 8th win in the bowl game. So you could find yourself with 9 wins last year, 8 wins this year. You could say that potentially that might be enough to buy you another year and get into this rev share era. But that didn't happen. Matter of fact, quite the opposite happened. And by halftime, the thing was well decided at 35-3. We took their best shot. It wasn't a great matchup for us to begin with. Our greatest shortcoming or weakness or limitation on the back end defensively, their greatest strength is the ability to get Taj Brooks lathered up and throw the football off of that. And they just cut us apart. And so this was probably the least optimal scenario for Neil to have any kind of chance to advance, is ending the season in the nature that we did.
Jed, do you think that given the comment that Neil Brown made about having fun at the game and, again, being mediocre this year, completely average, that it was just going to be too tough of a sell, too, as well for Renbaker?
Well, it reached a point where that was wildly misconstrued, but it was misconstrued because of the nature of the environment that had been created by that point. In other words, it reaches a point where people are looking to tear apart everything you say, to take a quote and run with it out of context or otherwise. And when you create that kind of environment, you find yourself at 500 when people expect a whole lot more. Those types of things are going to happen. If you're sitting there at 7-2 and he says that, people would understand what he meant. It was a great environment. It was a blackout. We never wore black uniforms. We honored the coal miners. That's what he intended. Now, he could have said it more judiciously, but again, when you're struggling and you say those types of things, they're going to be scrutinized greatly. And I think at the end of the day, that was yet another game. That Iowa State team was ranked, and we played them tough for 3+ quarters, but it wasn't enough, and they separated late, whereas we didn't. And when you look at what Neil did against ranked teams, 3-17 isn't good enough. I mean, traditionally, West Virginia, it's not like we're winning 70% of our games in the history of our program against ranked teams. No, traditionally, throughout the course of our history, we've won 27, 28% against ranked teams. Don Nealon was right in that 27, 28% area. So we're used to winning roughly 1 and 4 against those premier teams, and winning 1 out of 6 or 1 out of 7 is not enough to be competitive and to go on a run and get things to the point that you want to get them moving forward. But, the program at large is wildly stable from in the building. But when you're not winning the games and that's not translating on the field, that doesn't matter. Now, it's good news for whoever he hands the baton to, because it's a very stable baton. I mean, all the types of things that sometimes can be rough around the corners and lead to these types of problems, that's not been the case at all. I mean, I've said many times this season, we've faced a lot of adversity, self-inflicted and otherwise. And I've been or seen so many locker rooms that could come apart at the seams and turn on each other. Going through this level of turmoil and this level of heat. This locker room didn't do that. And that speaks to the culture and the types of kids that are populating that locker room. But we just, again, at the end of the day, couldn't win enough of those close games to be more than a 500 team.
Was there anything in particular Neil Brown could have done differently?
That's a good question. I think one of the setbacks that played out, and this was early on, he brought with him, when he brought his staff, he brought Vic Koenig as D coordinator. And Neil was kind of a global coach in the sense that he looks at the game big picture. He thinks all 3 dimensions of the game are interconnected. He's old school in that sense. And so he leaned on Vic Koenig during his time at Troy as a very trusted partner to run the defensive side of the football. And he came into West Virginia with him in 2019, and there were off-the-field circumstances that forced him out. So all of a sudden, you're left shuffling, and you need to find a new D coordinator, not the guy you took the job with. So he hired within. He promoted Jordan Leslie on staff. Initially, that worked out, but over the course of time, the personnel didn't necessarily fit. We guessed wrong in some of those portal acquisitions, and some of that caught up with us. And so this past season, he was forced to make another change kind of under fire in the middle of the season. And Jordan was sent on his way 3 games ago, and then came Jeff Coons, and that wasn't working out either. But part of that was, of course, personnel. But I do wonder if Vic Koenig had been retained throughout the duration of this. That was such a critical part of his success at Troy. I think there would have been an element of stability on that side of the ball. I'm not saying there were wild deficiencies with who we had, but that was a major change. We managed to turn around our run game, which was historically poor that first year, by building through the offensive line. And at the end of the day, guys, we weren't explosive enough offensively to bail out a sagging defense, and that's just not going to work. So maybe if you could have guessed right from a personnel standpoint on the defensive side with a couple guys that you otherwise didn't. We hit on some of those guys this past year, but we didn't hit on enough. And maybe that's what could be different.
Jed, do you have a style of coach, at least, maybe not a specific name, but someone who fits, who can hit the ground running there?
Well, I think the cultural piece you want to continue with. You need a solid culture at West Virginia. It's a tight-knit program, and when it's humming and firing on all cylinders, it's very close to the fan base. But I also think you need an innovator. When we've been at our best, it's in large measure somebody doing something against the grain that nobody else is willing or inclined to do, which compensates for some of our limitations or shortcomings in resources. You make it up on the X's and O's side from a creativity standpoint. Now, that doesn't grow on trees. Everybody's looking for it. But for instance, when you look back at what Rich Rod did, in large measure, it was because of that. He plugged in talent that fit something in a power spread offense that nobody else was doing from a tempo standpoint. He was running an odd stack before anybody else was doing it. We were going rugby punt before anybody else was doing it. And some of the same things that Coach Nealon was trying when he brought in Major Harris when nobody else was doing those types of things. With a quarterback like Major Harris back in the late 80s, you were typically running an option offense. Well, we were more pro style with the athletic Major Harris. Not a lot of teams are doing that. So when you look back historically at the types of things we were doing, whether it was Dana Holgerson's version of the air raid, it's always been somewhat different and innovative. And so I would think that would be a critical piece of whoever the next head coach at West Virginia is. And then, of course, you're going to have to be able to manage the modern roster, which means you have to be somewhat transactional as well. You have to understand your place in terms of fitting the pieces together in these ever-revolving doors that we're now handed from a roster management standpoint. I mean, there's some critical timelines, guys, as you know, coming up here in December. Not just with the portal, but with National Signing Day this week. I mean, some of those kids have said, look, our commitment's still there, but not maybe as firm. We're going to open it up to other possibilities between now and Wednesday. Others have said we're going to forge ahead. We'll see how that works out with who we get. But then from a roster retention standpoint, there's going to be pieces that you want to keep. So it's critical to get the next guy in the building quickly so he can do his own evaluation, determine who he does want to keep, and then jump into the portal, because that window opens up the 9th, and it varies depending on whether or not you're in the bowl or the playoffs. But you better get humming on that very quickly, because your starting point is going to be the roster you end December with, and then you got to go into the spring and go from there.
Jed, did I hear you mention Rich Rod?
What we talking about when Rich was here?
Right.
Yeah. A big part of his success.
Do you think that a former West Virginia head coach, and I know Dana Holgerson's now with Nebraska, and I know that ended sour. Is there any thought that a former coach that was there might be in the mix for this time?
It's hard to say. I mean, I do know that Wren is a very thorough guy. He's 3 for 3 with what looked like, at least at this early stage, 3 slam dunk hires that he's made since taking this job. Jen Greeny on the volleyball front, Mark Kellogg on the women's hoops front, and then, of course, Darian DeVries. Darren's done a great job with the men's basketball program the first handful of games through, a couple ranked wins over the weekend. But so he has a track record, even back to North Texas, of making very solid hires. And that doesn't happen when you're not thorough and you're not patient and you don't vet. And he is obviously going to do all those things, start with a large list, whittle it down to a more realistic list, and find what's absolutely, in his estimation, the best fit. And based on his track record, I fully trust his judgment. He's done a great job of diving in and embracing the culture and learning to understand it, because it's a different animal here in West Virginia. I mean, it's one of only a couple states that there's no other pro team, and we're the biggest show in town. You got Marshall down the road as a G5, but West Virginia is what stirs the drink. I mean, it's the straw that stirs the drink in this state. That Flying WV, you can't go anywhere in any corner of the state and travel more than 2 minutes without seeing somebody wearing a Flying WV logo, and I'm not exaggerating whatsoever. So it's very meaningful to the people here. And in that sense, you have to embrace that. And that's something Wren's done. And he's come to understand that. And I think he knows the type of fit that it takes to win, and the type of fit it takes to resonate with the fan base as well. So I trust him to do the right thing in terms of whatever his choice turns out to be. But these things, they happen for reasons. And even when you look at rivalry games, I mean, Neil, in 3 years, I firmly believe that in 3 games against Pitt, we've outplayed them 3 times, yet we have 1 win to show for it. And those types of things tend to catch up to you. And I mean, at the end of the day, this is just stacking all the wrong pennies that end up working against you. And it's not as though we weren't competitive. It's not as though we were getting blown out and winning 3 games a year. Okay, we were competitive, just not competitive enough, and we weren't finding enough ways to win enough of those big games. Again, in the history of West Virginia, you're not supposed to dominate those games, but you do have to find your way to win your share of them. And traditionally, that's in that 27% or so mark. And if you can exceed that, even better. We couldn't get to that. And that's all leading us where we are today.
Hey, man, you always do a great job. We'll be back in touch with you once they make a decision, whenever that might be. Hell of a basketball team. We look forward to that. Can't wait to talk to you again. Thanks for your time.
And I will say one more thing, Smokey,
yes,
to your
sir.
audience down in Waco. Well, I wish a lot of those folks would have got their way and have fired Dave Aranda. I truly wish that. But, I really wish that would have happened.
Yeah.
But, unfortunately, it didn't for the rest of us. So.
No, yeah, it's amazing because at this time a year ago, I mean, that was absolutely on the table, and Mac Brown's figured out, okay. And then what I also like about what they did, and I don't think Neil Brown was going to be in this position, Mac said to Dave, what do you need to be successful going forward? And they worked it out. They've strengthened some things, and here they are. Doesn't mean next year's going to be all, sweet and good, but, man, they did turn it around, especially after a 2-4 start.
I talked briefly to Jake, the Spav, after the game, and I said, look, it's reached the point now, and what I told him then, I believe even more firmly now, a couple weeks later, offensively, they're playing the best football in the Big 12 and among the best football in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And, as a team, I might even say that. I don't know if anybody in this league would want to touch them right now. I really don't. Good for Dave, good for Jake. They got that thing rolling. They're good people down there.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Jed Drenning, West Virginia sideline analyst, but also you can find him on Twitter at The Signal Caller, and he does have a newsletter, a preview magazine that he puts out that is absolutely incredible with history within the Big 12 Conference. Congratulations to Jeff Messer from Abilene, Texas. He won the Texas Beef House College Football Pick'em Contest. He's already gotten in touch. We've already gotten him in touch with Samantha Duvall at TexasBeefHouse.com. I think we have 2 more competitions. We're gonna have to there's not enough conference championship games.
There's 8. I've already put it there. It's there. It's there.
Are you going to buy the new gift card?
Oh, well, I mean, it's there.
No, I think we have 2 left.
Oh, yeah.
So if you've already put up the conference championship games, that's fine. And then maybe you put a couple of FCS games in there too. And then we'll have one at the end of everything, at the end of whoever is playing for the national championship in January.
I actually do have some exciting news about that we'll share next week.
Okay, we'll do that coming up, but we're not done. We'll have Phil Bennett around the corner. Do you have the Dan Hurley, Kim Mulkey, and Elton John tweet? I don't know where I saw this one.
Hang on.
But Dan Hurley, of course, lost his mind in Hawaii last week. They lost 3 straight games. Dan Hurley is Kim Mulkey without being dressed like Elton John.
Yeah, I actually never looked at Kim Mulkey and thought Elton John. It just never occurred to me. But they really do shop at the same store. At least they have the same thing.
You think she's the one shopping for those clothes?
Yeah. No, I mean her.
I thought you said that.
Well, Johnny Derrick.
Yeah, I thought you told me Johnny took care of that.
Yeah, he's into fashion. But
I saw where Hurley earlier this over the weekend said they're not going to play in that Maui Invitational anymore. You got your ass kicked 3 different times. I don't know about ass kicked, but he was just acting crazy during that time. Guess what? They play Scott Drew and Baylor coming up Wednesday night at UConn. So that will be an interesting note there. And Baylor hasn't been playing that well. Houston's got a couple of hickeys on them, too. And UConn dropped from number 1 to 25 in the latest poll. When we come back, Phil Bennett, plus a couple more things to get to, and this is 365 Sports. Alan Samuels, Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, Ram, Fiat, they just wrapped up, of course, and there might still be a little bit left in that Black Friday sales event following Thanksgiving. I've had an issue with my Ford Explorer, which I bought, a pre-owned car 4 years ago at Alan Samuels, and just all of a sudden I started having some engine trouble, and it's one of those that you think it might cost $300-400, and it might be more than that. So they're working on it, and I'll tell you right now, it's at a Ford dealership right now because it's a Ford car. But I wanted to bring this up because Ted Teague set me up with a car to drive around most of the last week or so, and then they needed that back, and then he gave me another one for me to drive while we figure out what are they going to do with my engine and also the car that I bought at their dealership, the Ford Explorer. So I appreciate the customer service there and what they do. They are loaded with cars, trucks, and SUVs. There's a lot of people. I'm not one that I've ever bought a car at the end of the year because it's the end of the year, but business owners do that a lot. Maybe you have a fleet that you want to get. They have specials and discounts, dealer discounts and more available on what they have with Ram trucks and Jeep, the Wagoneer and Grand Cherokee and more. There's even something with a Compass and a Hornet if you want that. It's unbelievable the amount of cars they have on the lot, sometimes as many as 400. Earlier today, I saw this big, long, gorgeous white SUV. It was a Grand Wagoneer, the highest level you can. It is beautiful. White and has, I think, some gold trim. And Alan Samuels, Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, Ram, Fiat has that too. Loop 340 east of 84 in Waco.
Get ready, Baylor fans. The ultimate game weekend experience awaits you at the Baylor Club. Kick off your weekend with our Friday Night Live pep rally. With live entertainment and special appearances from the Baylor Spirit Squad, it's the perfect way to start your game weekend with a roar. On Saturdays, don't miss our Knox Hall tailgate. Enjoy delicious food, ice-cold drinks, and great company as you gear up for the big game. And after the weekend's excitement, wrap it all up with our famous Bear brunches on Sundays. Don't wait. Make your game weekends legendary with a Baylor Club membership today.
There are 26 letters in the alphabet, over 600,000 words in the dictionary, and just 3 of them said together can change everything. Let's order pizza. Those 3 words lead to dough made from scratch and 3 fresh signature cheeses that blanket golden crust in a heavenly melt on Marco's Pizza that'll blow your mind. So visit Marcos.com to order and stop by Marco's Pizza in Belmead, China Spring, Woodway, and in Robinson. Marco's. Pizza lovers get it.
With so many companies and policies out there, it gets so confusing shopping for insurance, and I never know if I'm getting the policy that's right for me. Luckily, I met the team at the Nitschke Group Insurance Agency. With the Nitschke Group, you can go to one company and get access to coverage options from many insurance carriers, and you get to speak to a real person about your specific coverage needs. With the Nitschke Group, I know I'm getting the right coverage at the right price. If you need insurance, talk to the experts at the Nitschke Group at 1-800-258-8302.
This is 365 Sports.
The Sikkim 365 app is brought to you by Alan Samuels Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, Ram, Fiat. Come by, let's be friends.
Baylor National Championship head basketball coach Scott Drew with me, David Smoak, 365 Sports. Let me ask you this. Let's start with football. How much does a program, and you've seen the ups and downs and they're really, really good, and there's been some other ones, how much does that affect in any way basketball, recruiting, Baylor, et cetera?
I think it has a big effect. Why I say that is you look at the year of the Bear, some of our best years basketball-wise have been best years football-wise. Iron sharpens iron biblically, and I know when our players see success from the football team, it motivates, inspires, and at the same time, you want to be successful on campus like other teams are. So I think it works where all the athletes want to carry their weight and do their part. So admissions wise, I'm sure it has an effect as well. But on a personal note, couldn't be more happy for the staff. I know it's not easy when you get out to a 2-4 start, but what they did to finish the year was inspiring, motivating, encouraging, and tremendous job by the football team and Coach Aranda and the staff.
Yeah, no, it's been a remarkable run, and you've had to have teams have turned it around sometimes in the middle of the season. I'll never forget the Tristan Clark team when you had to completely change your mentality. This has been kind of a tough start considering what you're used to, but you've played really good people. What do you do? Do you start to mess with your lineup? Do you start to grind through it? What do you do?
Well, first and foremost, we continue to pray that we get everybody healthy. I was talking to our trainer. We've had less than 5 days of practice with our rotation guys. And until you can practice together, you can't even begin to get chemistry, rotation, lineup. So hopefully we can stay injury free from here on out and develop some rhythm and consistency. At the same time, playing a schedule like we've played, I don't think we've played as hard a schedule as far as playing open up against Gonzaga and Spokane, and then Arkansas, and then turn around in the Bahamas, St. John's and Tennessee. And I don't know what Tennessee and Gonzaga is ranked this week, but I know a lot of people have them in their top 5, and there's a reason. One of the few teams that return a backcourt and enough veteran players that are successful to really give them an advantage early in the year. What it'll do for us is hopefully speed up our maturation process. So by the time we get to conference, we've seen the best. We've seen what works, doesn't work, and we're ready to put our best foot forward come conference time. But I know first and foremost, we got to get people healthy for practices. And I mean, strep throat, tweaked ankles, hamstrings, all that stuff. At the end of the day, you got to have people. You got to have people available to get that chemistry and rhythm.
Do you have everybody for the most part back for Wednesday against UConn?
Well, we've had VJ with his hamstring, so he's been limited. Rob tweaked his foot; he was out for a day. So we'll see today who we have. I'll let you know in a couple hours.
How tough mentally, and the perseverance and also the resiliency of Langston, who has had bad luck and then sometimes just part of attrition of playing the game. How do you keep him, and how has he handled all the frustration?
Well, I think with Langston, obviously we just got him back, and keeping him healthy moving forward is going to be paramount, where we can start to get some rhythm and chemistry. He told me, he goes, it's amazing what you don't know until you step on the floor and play with guys, from the standpoint, just the feel you have for the team, and what needs to improve, what needs to get better. And he's somebody that has been a part of our program, knows what we want offensively, defensively, and can provide great leadership in both those areas once he's able to get some rhythm and chemistry with the guys on the court. And you say, what has he learned? I think the word perseverance, and spiritually, we prepare champions for life. So spiritually, I think he's definitely grown through this. And at the end of the day, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And proud of where Langston is spiritually, academically, character formation. And hopefully we keep him well the rest of the year so the basketball part can take care of itself.
Absolutely. So you have what you guys have dealt with. UConn is in not a free fall, but my goodness, they've lost 3 in a row. Hurley's always mad, but now, and then Houston has had a couple of hickeys too. What do you explain that? Is that just really good scheduling and maybe teams not quite where they need to be?
No, I think first, when you have elite teams playing elite teams, you're going to have people get losses. And when you play on neutral courts, that makes it hard as well. So you look at it, and UConn was right there in all 3 of those games. They could have been 3-0 just as easily as 0-3. With Houston, same thing. They could be undefeated right now. But I think that just when you have scheduling used to be maybe 1 or 2 marquee games in the non-conference schedule. Now you're seeing a lot of teams playing 3-4. In our case, we'll have 5 after this Wednesday, and normally that did not happen before. So you're going to have more losses. I mean, if you take the top 4 football teams, and if 2 of them play each other, then you're going to have 2 teams lose that are in the top 4. Doesn't mean they're bad teams, just means when you have the best playing the best, someone gets a loss.
Yeah, I saw where Hurley mentioned that he didn't want to do these that tournament again, and obviously he's got he's scarred right now. But they've won 2 in a row. Are those tournaments going to be affected by what's going on in Vegas and elsewhere? Or do you feel like that's still going to be that's what people go and play?
No question. I think if you have NIL tournaments and how you are able to attract talent is through NIL. People are going to play more NIL events, and there'll be more NIL tournaments. That'll definitely happen because at the end of the day, that's part of recruiting. And that's why it's sad for tournaments like Maui and other things that have been around a long time. But again, different rules. You got to go to different systems or different thoughts or ways of doing things to keep up.
How do you measure what you want to do with this team, and yet also the preseason is running out? You have a game at the end of this month in the Big 12. When do you say, okay, we still need time to gel, or do you start to make major changes?
Well, I think first you look at it. We lost at Gonzaga. And normally teams that return players have an advantage. We lost to Tennessee. Same thing can be said to that. And I would think both those teams, if you played a national tournament right now, would be 2 of the Final 4 teams from the standpoint they have such an advantage having at the end of the day in college football, I'm sure it's the quarterback position, and basketball, it's your guards. And if you have returning guards that know the system, know what the coach wants, and they're really talented players, that gives you such a big advantage early in the year. But that's why you play a non-conference and a conference, so that you can have a team at the end of the year that peaks. And for teams like us that have had 1 returning starter, and you've had Langston back in practice for a couple days and in a couple games, it's going to take time for us to get chemistry and the rhythm. And then as that happens, we'll be better and better. And at the same time, playing the schedule you play, as you know, those things are decided a year in advance, sometimes 2 or 3 years in advance. So if I'd have gone in the beginning of the year knowing that we wouldn't have everybody healthy like this, you would change some of the things you would do. But at the same time, if you planned on having everybody in summertime and hopefully having some rhythm and chemistry in the beginning of the year to give yourself a better chance to be successful. But at the end of the day, again, in the Big 12, there's no cupcakes, and you got to bring it each and every night. So the sooner you see what you got to do to be successful against other elite teams, that'll help you for Big 12 play for sure. But again, this has been tough playing 5 early on. I don't know if in 22 years we played 5 this caliber in the beginning of the year. And I mean, Mark Few, Hall of Fame coach, great program. Rick Barnes, Hall of Fame coach, great program. Rick Pitino, Calipari, Hall of Fame, great programs. Hurley, Hall of Fame. I mean, so you're going to get exposed if there's any weakness in your armor.
Scott, you have a team that can shoot the threes, and I know that doesn't always work, but that's what people want to guard against in this day and age of basketball. Are you able to find ways to get mid-range jumpers and look at that trend? You seem like you got guys that are pretty good at running that floater down the lane.
Yeah, I think everything is if you base it on analytics, everybody wants a 3 or at the rim. Then as a coach, you got to find out what exceptions to the rules are there. And if you find a player that's good in the mid-range, obviously you're going to let them take those. If you got last year, Ray J. Dennis's floater was elite. And at the same time, in the first couple games, I think he was taking floaters from the free throw line. Later in the year, he was taking more high percentage floaters. So I think every year things are a little different. You adjust to see what's working, what's best for the team. And then you sacrifice a little of your game for what's best to the team every year. And that's part of being on a team.
Well, last thing, how would you describe Dan Hurley?
someone that does a tremendous job getting the most out of his teams, and obviously very passionate and emotional. But at the same time, coaching wise, when you win 2 back-to-back national championships like they've done, especially with the parity nowadays, that's really impressive. So hats off to him. Us coaches' sons stick together, and I know he's got a great father figure that taught him a lot, and I know the Drew family and Hurley family have a lot of respect for each other.
Scott, thank you very much. Good luck at UConn. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. You gonna be there, Smokey?
No, I'm not. I'm getting ready to go down to Florida to see my 2 brothers because we lost one of them earlier in the year. So we're going to go down and have a little get together, time. Yeah.
Good for you.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you.
Be safe. Thanks, Smoak.
Well, Scott Drew, Baylor men's basketball coach with us, 365 Sports. Thank you to Scott Drew. Thanks to Matt Roberts setting that up, and Emery for getting that in the can and recorded for the show today. Coming up, Phil Bennett. He is next to look back at what happened in College Station. He texted me as I was leaving for the studio at the end of the Baylor-Kansas game. We'll share that too and more. And this is 365 Sports. IdealMRI.com. By the way, before I go much further on Ideal, I did get a text from Ted Teague as I was wrapping up my last endorsement for Alan Samuels. He goes, today is the last day of the Black Friday sales event, so it's not over. You still have until the end of today, and big rebates with low rates are still available. Ideal MRI, where I have been as a patient or as someone who needed to get some evidence on what's going on. My lower back's kind of a mess, and that happens over time. And I've had injections and not really great success with those. And I'm going to be involved with seeing another back specialist as a part of the Scott and White Hillcrest group, and a guy that I got an injection from several years ago, and I'm going to go back to him again. I don't know why I didn't the second time or the third time, but the one thing I do know is I have an updated MRI from Ideal MRI, where they don't charge more than $497 or less every time. $497 or less, the average MRI, and I need to look this up again, is somewhere around $1,100. I have paid as much as I think it was one time. It blew me away. $1,600 for an MRI. That's ridiculous. So you can go and get your MRI and have a state-of-the-art imaging machine that they have inside the Central Texas Marketplace on the southern part of Waco off I-35. Ideal MRI with the state-of-the-art technology that you will get the images that you want, that your doctor requests, and then maybe find a way to get rid of some of the pain you might have in your lower back or your hip or maybe your knee or somewhere else that's bothering you. Dr. Rob Maxey and his staff have done an amazing job with this company. IdealMRI.com.
In Texas, there's pea-size hail and baseball-size hail. Guess which one hit our house? We didn't even know where to begin, but we called our Texas Farm Bureau insurance agent, and he was so reassuring. He knew exactly what to do to get our house back into shape and our lives back to normal. Now, we're even more thankful for the roof over our heads.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McLennan County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
At Ideal MRI, we feel blessed to be part of the Waco community. We're a small family business here in Central Texas. At times like this, the cost of healthcare has never been more important. And unfortunately, significant illnesses and injuries still occur. And that's why Ideal MRI is open and here to serve you through this difficult time. So if you need an MRI, ask your doctor about Ideal MRI. You can schedule online in minutes at IdealMRI.com or call 833-IDEAL-MRI.
When you work with a bank, you should expect the best of everything. That includes face-to-face personal service and the kind of community banking care that only comes from one neighbor to another. That's exactly what you'll get from the First National Bank of Central Texas, where you will know your banker works just as hard as you do. Once again, that's the First National Bank of Central Texas. Settle for nothing less than the first. Member FDIC.
Baylor alumni are more than 160,000 strong. When we all
all join hands to support our university, we don't just move the needle, we move mountains. Working together, we create life-changing opportunities for students on the field, in the classroom, in the laboratory, and in life for generations to come. So get connected. Get involved. Learn how at baylor.edu/alumni.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. This segment is brought to you by Bud Light. Enjoy the smooth, crisp taste of Bud Light beer. Easy to drink, easy to enjoy.
Phil Bennett, longtime college football coach, on with us Mondays. And, man, this is always a phenomenal segment, sitting out in that beautiful backyard with the pool, the outdoor kitchen, and so much more. I will get to the text that you and I shared when I was leaving the Baylor game for the post-game show. But let's start with what happened in College Station, because I thought Texas looked fabulous.
They did.
That game was not as close as 17-7. That defense was as good as I've seen them have maybe ever.
You could see earlier in the game that they were playing fast. They were playing fearless. Their front on both sides of the ball, Smokey, just dominated. Both sides of the ball. And that makes it hard for play callers. One of the things they did that I haven't seen Texas do all year, they ran the ball vertically on the run game. And their running back had 186 yards, and I thought Sark did a really good job. He saw that they were getting some good push, and he never let off. Had right at 250 yards rushing, and that's hard to lose a game when you have that many yards.
Let me ask you a question, Paul. But he was getting what seemed like over and over Weisner, who played at Conley, by the way, for a couple of years, here in Waco. 8 yards on first down, right, on runs between the tackle. Tough kid. I can't even imagine as a defensive coordinator, you just got to throw your hands up, because then you're set up for the play action. And then on top of that, you can't stop that in the first place.
I found it interesting that that's where A&M has been hurt. And Texas has been more of a sideline to sideline perimeter run team. But I thought Kyle Flood and Sark, that they pinpointed what they wanted to do, and they lost Banks early in the game, and I thought, well, that might be an advantage. And A&M's front is a pretty good front. They have small linebackers, but they really took advantage of it. And I tell you something, the back was hard to bring down. I mean, he would get hit, he would get 4 or 5 more yards. I think just about on every carry that he had.
Phil, can someone go to College Station and tell Colin Klein, who I think is going to be an outstanding coach, that you have Marcel Reed and that you're at the 1 yard line? A naked bootleg would have been an awesome play to run and not run into the teeth of those defensive tackles who've been eating your lunch in those situations all day.
I was surprised. They went to what we call in coaching the heavy package. So, sometimes there's a lot of people talking. Your line coach wants to, and A&M, thought they could knock them off the ball, which obviously didn't work. I was hoping after they called the timeout on the last 2 4th downs that they would see that, you know what, they're loading the middle. Let's get to the perimeter. Now, I will say this. The play they ran on 3rd and 1 before the last 4th and 1, he should have scored. He missed the cut. It was a walk-in. And I'm not sure. I did not like the call with putting the quarterback under center and trying to power it. And, if you notice, they didn't block 91. They didn't block the play side in, and the nose guard swam the center. And there was 3 guys hitting the back before he even got to the line of scrimmage. So it just wasn't a good call.
Coach, what was that atmosphere like the first time in so long seeing these two fan bases on a football field and in a stadium together? What was that like?
It was electric. It really was. It was, I talked to a friend of mine that's a very prominent Texas alumni, And his exact words to me, he said, God almighty. He said, how have they not got this place going? Because it was electric. Right at 110,000. I mean, it was a who's who. I went to this tailgate. I'm in partners with one of my former players, and I see this blonde-headed woman there, and I'm going, my God, who is that? I've seen her before. So finally, I've never felt so stupid. I said, when did you go to school? It would end up being Fox News Laura Ingram.
Oh, really?
Oh my God, that's who it is. And she, believe it or not, she says, I know you. She said, I said, how do you know?
Did we lost your sound? Oh, there you go. Okay. So she said,
I said,
I know.
She said, she knew who I was. She said, I was in Dallas. I guess she was doing work in Dallas at one time. Years ago in the early 2000s. But she has a daughter that is a freshman at A&M. How crazy is that?
Absolutely. I want to go back to the first drive when they went for it twice and they didn't make it on 3rd and 4th and short, and then the one after the block punt, which set them up at the doorstep. Do you think, did that remind you any of Kansas State's ego against Baylor's defense back in 2012?
All I'm going to tell you, it's a learned trait. I think they felt like their matchups were better than what they were. A&M, last week, also they struggled a little bit with the wedge. When people get, 2 in the A gap, 2 in the B gap, backers stacked up, I mean, they're telling you that, you know what, they're daring you to go to the perimeter. But I think, there's a little bit of what you learned. And I think Mike wants to be physical, the head coach. And I think they have great confidence in their offensive line. They really feel like their line has played good this year.
Phil, what do you think about some of the coaching changes we've seen? Gus Malzahn going, down to the coordinator route of going to FSU. Neil Brown's gone. Mac Brown out. Any opinions on those jobs particularly?
I think that, it's obviously it's that time of year, and you're going to have change. And I've said this for since I've been in coaching, coaches are hired to be fired, and it doesn't make them bad coaches. It's just some of the fits, some of the things. Neil Brown did not have a great game at Tech, but he's done a fairly good job. He has a winning record at West Virginia. They just want more, and everything's about timing. Gus Malzahn is truly, as a head coach, he's very involved in the offense, the scheme. I can see that because I know Gus. He loves the strategy of coaching, and I'm not sure he loves the headaches of being a head coach. Gus has made a lot of money. When Auburn fired him, they owed him $20 million or $18 million. So he's going to do something with a young man that, Mike hired him, or he hired Mike way back in Tulsa. They have a relationship, and Mike's going to let him take that offense over, and it could be a win-win for both of them.
Coach, guy who was on the hot seat heading into this season was old Dave Aranda down here in Waco, and he's reeled off 6 straight wins. They're 8-4. We'll go to a pretty nice bowl game as a result. Your thoughts on a demolition of what was a really red-hot Kansas team rolling in, and just the streak that they've been able to conclude here over these last 6 weeks or so?
Craig, think about this. At halftime, Kansas really had not been stopped, but both teams had right at 300 yards at halftime, and Kansas actually had more than Baylor. But Baylor got 3 takeaways, and let's say this again: we had 0 turnovers, and when you have 600 yards and no turnovers, you're going to kick somebody's ass. And they had 3 turnovers. Defense, got better in the second half. Still, kept coming. They missed a field goal, and I'm telling you, when you score that much, it takes them out of their comfort zone. They weren't able to do. Jeff wasn't able to do what his original plan was. I think they were averaging like 6.8 yards a carry in the first half. They did a good job. And then we were able to go back to our run game, and nobody could stop anybody. But the turnovers were the difference. You know, one team I think had right at 500 yards. Baylor had 600, but Kansas had 3 turnovers. And I thought they did an excellent job. I thought that offensively that Jake knew exactly what he wanted to do. I thought Sawyer was unbelievable. I think check this, but I think I kept up with it during the game. I think they were close, maybe 12 for 14 or something like that.
11 to 15. Yep.
11 to 15. I mean, which, you know, like I said, that is demoralizing to defenses. And as I said, we've talked about this. I applaud the coaches, Dave being the head coach, everybody that's around those kids have contributed to being positive, staying the course, not taking and letting people outside the program talk, and it just fills me with pleasure to see what they've done.
Actually, 13 of 17 on third down conversions, which is like you can't get off the field as a defense, and what they did. I don't know if you heard about this, but Dave Aranda was asked about the defense, and you were one that taught me about red zone efficiency. Yeah, and he was asked about, Coach, I'm not sure how you are about yards allowed or whatever. They gave up 17. The first part of the game, KU was moving the ball up and down, missed a field goal. And he said he went to the sideline to talk to some of the players, and some of them had smiles on their face, and he goes, I feel bad for my defensive coaches that they have to listen to me, because he was like, what are we effing laughing about? I mean, I said, that's Phil Bennett, because he was upset even though they had kind of controlled the scoring part of that game. You never used that, did you?
Oh, yeah. That's the game, but that's where you keep your edge. And I saw the second half, that edge came back. And I'm telling you something. They took Jeff out of his comfort zone. That quarterback. And I'm going to tell you something. Baylor had some guys. I looked up that number 59. I think he had 5 or 6 huge tackles. I mean, their front played good.
Yeah. And they had a couple of picks. They forced some turnover. Paul, did you have another follow-up on it?
No. Yeah,
and had a couple of picks with Devin Bobby, who was a player that couldn't catch it. Right. Of course, defensive backs are defensive backs because they aren't able to play wide receiver. Phil, with what you saw from UT, the dominance that they had, and they were so much more superior than A&M. Maybe a break or two. Well, hell, A&M had a couple of breaks or two and couldn't do anything about it.
Couldn't take advantage of it.
That team right now with who they are and Ewers that played with Payne and what they have at running back or whatever, where would you put them in the mix of no matter who makes the college football playoff?
I think they're right where they need to be. I think that I've had the pleasure of watching Oregon, and I think they're a good team, but I think they're very beatable. If Texas plays to the level they played against A&M, they're going to get in it, and they're going to go a long way. And one of the things that's going to be interesting is this week is the approach that will they try to run the ball, which I hope they do because they can, inside the tackles, because they didn't do that the first time against Georgia. What's going to happen with that? I'm sure I don't expect Banks to play. He's got so much to risk, but the kid that played behind him did a great job. Can they still get that north-south run game and be able to do it? What people don't talk about Texas either, they've got a tight end that is a stud of a player.
Yeah, good.
Gunnar Helm,
yeah. And I'm going to tell you something. He gives you in a comfort zone that quarterbacks need. You can look at Mahomes with Kels. You look at the Purdy with their tight end.
Kittles,
from Iowa. I mean, tight ends give a quarterback a comfort zone. Good ones.
Yeah, and Robertson's got one with the Trigg, the
right.
transfer
exactly
from Ole Miss.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
and I think this this game too. I think that I thought that Texas played a fairly good game. Gave up a couple plays in the passing game against Georgia, but they've got to make sure that they don't turn the ball over the way they did the first game.
And a lot of it was on their side of the field, too.
Yeah. It was a short field, absolutely.
I have not been impressed with Georgia's offense much at all this year. Is it the receivers? Is it the running game? Beck looks like he's kind of always erratic. What have you seen when you've watched them on offense?
I watched every snap of the Georgia Tech game, and I really felt like Georgia Tech should have won the game. I thought Georgia Tech's defensive coordinator, it drove me nuts. He went to prevent with 4 minutes to go on that one drive that they had gone up by 2 touchdowns. And I said, I told my wife, I said, this could be fatal, because they had been doing a good job, and that's what that does. It prevents you from winning. And that's what happened. But I look at the game and I thought that Georgia kids, they play hard, but on offense, their freshman back is getting better, but their front offensive line is not near to where it was the last 3 years. I do commend Kirby Smart, because he's doing more with less, probably at any time in his career. It's probably back to the beginning. I think his quarterback, unfortunately, has been too many turnovers, but he's playing well enough. He's got him in the championship game. And I think if you ask people that know football, they say, Georgia has done a really good coaching job this year.
What I would say about Georgia's offense is that they had Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey and a bunch of first-round guys, and they actually really don't have first-round draft. They've got NFL players, that's for sure, but when you go from those surefire first-round picks to guys who are second to third day picks, there's going to be a little bit of a drop-off because they don't really have those guys right now.
I think that's a good analogy, and I think I go back to the front. I think the front on both sides of the ball is where the biggest drop-offs are. And if you remember, if all of you probably watched the Georgia Tech game, they dropped too many balls. Mm-hmm. I mean, the quarterback got a bad rap, and he's putting balls on the number, and they couldn't catch them.
Phil, if you don't mind, one more on that game. I thought Haynes King, who was at A&M,
stud.
My 300 yards passing, 100 yards rushing, like 5 touchdowns or whatever it was. Can you tell me how in the world did Jimbo Fisher screw that up? I'm not saying he's an All-American, but that guy, and his dad, John, a coach at Longview,
love him.
Is tougher than nails. How did they screw that up? Because they don't seem to have a quarterback even now.
Smokey, one thing about coaches, we all do what we do, but I've always said this. Of course, my brothers were all high school. High school coaches do the best job because they do what their players are able to do. Jimbo was stubborn, tried to make Haynes into a drop-back passer. This guy, who's actually a Georgia guy that's at Georgia Tech right now, has done a phenomenal job of doing what Haynes can do. He can throw, he can run, he moves the pocket with him. He's 6'3", 205 pounds, and he's fast, and he is a threat. I guarantee you, at the end of the game, I looked at Kirby, and he said something to the coach, and he looked at him, and he almost beat him last year. He said, I don't want to play this sucker again.
Yeah. The coach for Georgia Tech was devastated. He's a Georgia Tech guy, hates
Brent
Georgia.
Key, yeah.
Brick. He was devastated. I hate it for him.
And you know what? That's what I appreciate about Kirby Smart. I mean, they're like the A&M Texas. I have a great admiration for Texas. Played them, played against them, coached against them. And I applaud what they did a great job. I saw that in the Georgia Tech game. Kirby was he knew what Coach Keys was feeling, what he's put into it, and I thought his sportsmanship and class was just outstanding, and it did me good.
Thank you, man. Appreciate your time, Coach.
All right, guys. We'll
Great
talk
to see
soon.
you. That's Phil Bennett, longtime college football coach. He's now retired, consults. And, last week he was talking about he wasn't so sure about the Texas defense. He said that a couple of different times. I think now he knows that what we saw in that game against A&M was absolutely, like fire ants pissed off at the world, the way they played defense against the Aggies.
So, we didn't talk about these games much, but Paul, thoughts on the return of A&M and Texas? That to me was –
it was a dud of a game.
That was A&M. That was A&M, all right.
It was a dud of a game as far as what we – but, it was very A&M. And, they're 8-4. They, a leopard can't change their spots, but, they've been 8-4. I do – what was upsetting to me watching it is that as you look at it, you knew this was not going to be on either sense. To me, it felt a lot like the Notre Dame game at the beginning of the year where both these defenses are really good. You're not going to see a lot of high-flying offense. It's about who makes big plays. And A&M had two really big plays, one that they scored on the 93-yard return by Willie. The block punt, not getting any points of that is inexcusable. And then just
the moment he didn't scoop it up and score, I was like, they're not even going to score points here.
Yeah, and I don't know why they were in such a rush. It's a block punt. You can take your time to pick it up.
Tight butthole play calling in the red zone where it was just like, let's do this, where Colin Klein's usually pretty innovative. The last couple weeks, he just hasn't been.
Well, why not? And this, I said it when they got down the first time and they went for it and they got stuffed and it set the tone for the rest of the game. Got to put points in the board early. It's early. That's not going to be a game that's 35-30. Put points in the board.
Oh, and the decision to not kick the field goal, that was stupid as
Yeah,
hell.
the first drive. And then he gets stopped for 2 or 3 yards, and it was a great play by Texas. And then then you just put points. Here's what I do know, and I said this, and I've seen it over and over again. Because I've seen him do it to my favorite team, and I've seen him do it on the road in very hostile environments. Think about where they've won lately. They've won in Tuscaloosa and Ann Arbor. And I'm not forgetting about other wins that they've had. They have won in some of the most mecca of stadiums. They seem to play better on the road in those environments than they do at home. Now, the last couple of years, I know the team has been really, really good at DKR, Royal Memorial Stadium. But they usually, in a game like this, even if they're not favored or even if they're not as good as they are the last couple of years, they feel like, even if they're not that good, it's just kind of like they enjoy that environment. They will make a play early. They will get a turnover early. A lot of times they will score first, and then everybody they play you couldn't pull a needle out of their ass with a dump truck.
Yeah.
They get so uptight, hyperventilate, and Texas forced that, and they forced that against A&M too. So, by the way, Tom, Phil Bennett played at Texas A&M. He coached at Kansas State. He coached at A&M too, but he played at Texas A&M. All right, when we come back, we got time. Let's get to the flags. The flag on the field and the logo in the Ohio State, Michigan, Florida, Florida State, North Carolina State, North Carolina. What is going on? It's not the first time. But the Big Ten, $100,000, they'll both of them won't even know that was a check that was written. So what is going on now with this having, it seemed like storming the field is one thing that gets contagious, and then also what we saw over the weekend, even though I know some of those are intense rivalries.
Here's what I believe on it. One, I think that, when you're like the 8th team to do it in a day, you've lost the luster. The Michigan-Ohio State one, I get that, but when you everybody does it because they saw it after that, it just kind of gets lame to me. I'm all about intense and sticking it to your rival and all of that. But I absolutely, I credit Sark a lot, and this is why I like him, is that he's just no, we're not going to be the 10th team today to do this crap. Get off the field. We're not. Look, and had they been the first team to do it, maybe he doesn't. But he knew, no. Look, we're Texas. We don't follow. Like, that's the thing about it. Have some.
Oh, I've seen them stomp on a logo.
Yeah, but like, again, have some understanding of the history of who you are, and maybe just don't do that. Michigan and Ohio State. Michigan was a very average team this year. They beat a team in Ohio State that they keep beating. To me, that was kind of funny. And then it got, a little bit scary. And then, neither coach backed off of it. So more power to them. But as it went through the day, it got lamer and lamer. And then I got upset about Florida doing it, not because they did it, but because this rivalry used to mean something. It used to be something. And now it's...
You don't think it does?
I'm not like it used to. I mean, a 7-5 team beating a 2-10 team.
I know, but you told me that beating Florida would make up for some of what...
But again, like... It used to be something. I sound like Marlon Brando. Like, I could have been a contender, but like, I can't. It used to be so cool.
Maybe it meant something to Florida.
And now it's not. But like, I know that kids today don't have the historical perspective and all that, and I can't expect them to. But to me, I don't know. It used to mean something.
If that would have been any team but Florida, would it have been as upsetting to you?
Oh, I mean, probably not. I mean, I was upset.
I get it.
All the Florida fans that when I tweeted out said, well, you rushed the field on a 6-5 team. And yeah, I didn't like that either. I didn't like it.
Okay.
I didn't like it because, again, when these two teams used to beat each other in the 90s, it was the number 3 team in the country and the number 1 team in the country, or number 1 and 2 or 4 and 5. Like, it had meaning. This meant nothing. Nothing.
It must have meant something to Florida.
It did, and I get it.
And I do remember when Craig, you saw him go over towards midfield and go, no, we're not going to do that. He said, listen, I watched Ohio State, Michigan in my hotel room, and we don't need to be doing that. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure the players still circled back and did it anyways, based on the video I saw. If that was out of order, then I apologize. But yeah, I mean, I think he did a good job of trying to corral that, and he's a classy guy, and I'm not surprised that Sark tried to put a stop to that, but I don't know. I think a lot of it is Baker Mayfield's fault, clearly, for what he did against Ohio State years back. I didn't think that would last as long as it did, but that's the first flag planting that I remember seeing, like, in this modern era. And it's the one that everybody, I think, was thinking about as all those events were going on the other day. I didn't think it would have the lasting legacy that it's had, but I think guys are just trying to do cool stuff. And it seems cool to plant a flag on your rival's field on their logo at the 50-yard line, and there's probably some social media aspect to it as well, because everything, especially for younger people, has that element to it. So I'm sure somebody was hoping it would make a really great picture for their Instagram or whatever, but I don't know. I did think it got really stupid as the day went along, though. It was one thing when it was Ohio State and Michigan, and clearly, like, that's a level of disrespect. You're not going to allow that. That turned into a whole mess of a situation that fortunately didn't get too out of hand after the pepper spray. But I don't know. Like, as the day went on, I kept seeing it. I was kind of the same way. I was just like, this is just lame. Like, at this point, like, it's not even cool. It's just kind of lame that everybody keeps doing this game after game after game.
To me, after a while,
the
dab. Like, everybody was doing the dab, and it got like
for
really
like 5
old.
seconds. Yeah, I mean,
like, okay.
I guess it's like any other trend that comes and goes, but. That was an interesting Saturday from that standpoint. I know it was the big talking point coming out of the weekend of, well, they must do something and this and that.
Yeah.
I mean, finding people $100,000 is not going to do a damn thing. I think that's chump change for a lot of schools, but I do think that you have to be aware of it and probably instill it in your players that that's not going to be something you're going to tolerate ahead of a game, so that they don't have it in their minds that that's going to be okay if they do in fact win. But it did get out of hand. Not that I was like, oh my God, I wasn't like that. It was just like, this is just getting lame. Like, it's 5 teams have done this today. It's just kind of corny at this point. So that's what they turned it into. That's something that was actually pretty cool at one point, to just being every team's doing it, and it's no longer that cool.
One thing that I was disappointed in, but not surprised, the Big Ten fined Michigan and Ohio State for them a couple of pennies, is that there were punches thrown, and there were punches that landed. And Ohio State and Michigan are not going to play in the Big Ten championship game, but they're also not going to enforce any suspensions. And you wonder if there's a couple of guys from Ohio State, and if Michigan has a bowl game, which they do, if they would be suspended. But they're not going to do that because that hurts the conference. That hurts the conference, and I think that's the second time that's happened within the Big Ten.
That's my biggest problem with college football right now, I think, is this conference stuff. Like, every conference has their own back and will do what it takes for them, and I feel like it's always sort of been that way, but now it's, like, really that way with realignment and just, I guess, the pressures for conferences to now, in the public eye, make this playoff TV money and, do all these different things that normally we didn't really give a damn about. Like, granted, we didn't have a playoff when I was growing up, so maybe I would have been there going like, go Big 8. I doubt it, though.
I don't think I ever felt that way. I never did.
And
ever.
This was something that, has always been a part of the SEC fabric, but I think it's taken on a different layer in the playoff landscape. And so that's something that I think plays into this where, yeah, Big Ten's not going to hurt their own people, but they damn sure would have expected if it was like a team from the SEC had done it, right?
Yep.
They'd be talking 100,000. But like everybody now, like, has their own protective shield around their league, and I don't think that's great for the sport.
No. Wasn't Michigan involved in a fight with Michigan State after the game, too?
So, that is what it is. They're a rowdy bunch, I guess, but I thought it was, kind of silly as the day went along and you just kept seeing it more and more. But I do think equally silly, if not more silly, is just the conferences kind of guarding themselves and becoming like these entities that they weren't prior to this year in many ways. And that's realignment's fault. That's the TV network's fault. That's the expanded playoffs fault to some degree. But I think if you had an expanded playoff where you were actually fair to everybody, it wouldn't be as much of an issue. But the fact that you're having certain leagues flex their muscles because they can and trying to force situations where it's not as even or the wins and losses don't even matter, well, that's just creating more of a conference pride type of thing where now you have Joey McGuire fighting for the entire Big 12 after his post. That's what it's turned into now, and I don't really love that.
All right, I don't either. Nick Saban, I like Nick Saban. I don't say I love Nick Saban, but I love what he accomplished, and I always enjoyed listening to him. On game day, he has all of a sudden started to drink the Sankey Kool-Aid. By the way, why would a conference that is so powerful have to, promote themselves anyway, have to defend themselves? Nick Saban on the McAfee show, on Friday, there are subjective issues in college football that are never going to change. If Ole Miss played in the Big 12, what would their record be? The Big 12, which used to be scared of their own shadow, fired back with this one. Baylor beat them in the Sugar Bowl to close out the 21 season. There was the TCU mauling of Ole Miss the year that they were left out. I think it was in 14. And then Texas Tech smothered Ole Miss 42-25.
Let me ask this. Are they getting the Big 12 money or are they getting SEC money? When we do this hypothetical.
Yeah, no,
are they getting the extra tens of millions of dollars that they get right now, or are they playing by the same rules as everybody else in the Big 12? Because I guarantee you, if they're playing by the same rules, there's not that much difference, Nick. Respect you and all that, but you don't need to be shilling for the SEC, pal.
I was disappointed. Yeah. I could listen to him in anything he talks about. And it also might be the voice and how he talks.
He's an ESPN employee, so we know that they're shilling galore right now. It's just shills running down their legs at this point. But, I mean, you know what I'm saying, though, about Ole Miss?
If they were making Big 12 money, $30-40 million a year rather than $60-65 million a year.
Why would we think that they would just roll through everybody?
No.
They wouldn't. And, how can you prove that? I can't.
They wouldn't if they are even making what they're making now.
Yeah, I can't prove that. So
no, but nobody can prove it. That's the thing, is nobody can prove it.
It's hypothetical discussion.
But again, if you just look at the numbers and all the things that you have, I mean, you have more solid things of what it is. And look, Georgia Tech the other night was the proof. Georgia Tech is the 5th best team in the ACC right now. Georgia is the number 2 team in the SEC, and if not for the call's not going a certain way a couple times for Georgia Tech, they win the game, which I'm not blaming the officials. It's just you need to have breaks, especially when you're doing that. But they dominated Georgia for 90% of that game.
Yeah, they did.
So it's not like
physically too.
And it wasn't like a fluky time thing was happening. They were beating them at the point of attack all night long. So it's not even hypothetical anymore about how these teams can stand up to each other. It's not. That's over.
Here's a Lane Kiffin quote on the where if they were in a different conference.
King shill here.
It's ridiculous. The difference of playing in the SEC and the ACC and Big 12. To think that you're looking at schools and you're talking about like Clemson, who they played over Alabama. It's stupid. I'm not going to name them. Like they can't just look it up on Google. Take some of those teams that are up there that haven't played anybody and put them down in the SEC. They're 500 teams. Ole Miss lost to unranked Kentucky. Ole Miss lost to what is LSU ranked in the top 25, just inside of it?
They shouldn't be.
Okay. And they lost to Florida, who's had a bad year. Those are the 3 losses for Ole Miss. So Lane, and I sometimes even enjoy his Twitter account, but both Lane Kiffin and Nick Saban are just being arrogant, and quite frankly, maybe Saban has earned that right to be that way, but I thought what both of them said during that time was stupid. One final thing, G.J. Kinney, we knew that he had a new contract. G.J. Kinney, back-to-back winning seasons at Texas State for the first time in that program's history. And so congratulations to him. He got the new deal, and also he has put Texas State in a position of winning back-to-back seasons and also going to a bowl game. When we come back, Paul Catalina and his top 5, and this is 365 Sports.
Richard Carr, Buick GMC Cadillac, they are the people that you can count on for all of your automotive needs, and I've counted on them plenty of times over the years. Had my car get into a couple of different accidents in the past 3 years, and both times took it over to Richard Carr, and they were able to get it squared away and get me back on the road and get me into a situation where I never could notice that anything was ever wrong with it. Didn't notice that the front end was all messed up or that the tires were messed up. It's driving like it's brand new, and right now they've got tons of savings over at Richard Carr. It's no secret that the GMC Sierra is the best truck on the road with a multi-pro tailgate, first-class interior, and power to spare. The GMC Sierra is the truck for Texans who want to drive the best. Right now, save $8,000 or more on all 2024 GMC Sierra SLT trucks in stock. Sierra's four-wheel drive versions have even bigger savings, so you can find a variety of Sierra trucks all over the lot right now for under $40,000. That's one of the new vehicle offerings they've got. Obviously, the customer service side of things, which is great, and which is what I was talking about at the beginning, as along with their repair department. First class all the way. So if you're looking to buy a car like the brand new GMC Sierras, or just get your car, truck, or SUV worked on like I've had done a couple of times over the last few years, then Richard Carr can get you squared away. They've also got a lot full of quality pre-owned cars and trucks as well, over 100 vehicles to choose from. So with Christmas right around the corner, a lot of traveling going on. Maybe you were just traveling and you're like, man, I need to look at something new. This car's not quite running the way it used to, or you just want something different. They can square you away no matter what you're looking to get done. So check them out. The big savings going on right now over at Richard Carr, including those GMC Sierras. Check them out, richardcarr.com, and off Highway 6, the Imperial exit.
If your business is like most, you need things done quickly. But if you're still tying your critical applications together on multiple shared public networks, you've probably been feeling the slowdown. And that's no good for business. A private UPN fiber network can get you and your business moving at the speed of light. Whatever you need, we can build it. Internet, Metro Ethernet, Waves, dark fiber. We deliver custom private networks and are focused on business customers only. Our next generation 100% fiber optic infrastructure offers you low latency and ultra scalable bandwidth with speeds up to 100 gigabit to run your critical applications. Your connection won't be limiting your performance anymore. It's diverse and scalable, so it can grow and change as your business grows and changes. And with a secure carrier-grade private network, you'll have all the reliability you need. Contact UPN today to learn more. Fast just got faster.
time for Paul Catalina's Top 5. Brought to you by Texas Beef House. Where's the best beef in Texas? Your house when you order from Texas Beef House. Unleash the flavor of Texas raised Wagyu. From our pasture to your plate, TexasBeefHouse.com.
Welcome into Paul Catalina's Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. Go use our promo code at the next auction, 365 Sports, for a discount. Let's dive into it. It's coaching hire and fire season. So, Neil Brown out at West Virginia. Who are my top 5 candidates there for the Mountaineers? Let's get into it. Number 5, Rich Rodriguez has done a great job at Jacksonville State. Did a great job at West Virginia before he bolted for Michigan. And it's been kind of a comedy of errors until Jacksonville State. Until then, there's a large segment of the West Virginia fan base that would love to have him back. But as we saw with Mack Brown in North Carolina, maybe the sequel's not as good as the original. So maybe some new ideas. But based on the results he's having at Jack State, he certainly does warrant a look from West Virginia and some other power conference schools because, hey, he's winning games. Number 4, Jimbo Fisher. This one, there's a huge segment of fans that would love this. This is a national championship winning coach. This is a guy who wouldn't come all that expensive because A&M's paying him $75 million to not coach at A&M. And I couldn't find a gif of him at A&M. I guess the Aggies scrubbed that from the internet because they'd like it forgotten. But he's a West Virginia native. He wants to get back into coaching. Now, can that offense that he runs win in the Big 12? Can he adapt and adjust and build a new offense? Can he hire a play caller? Can he do all those things? I don't know. That's up to West Virginia and Jimbo Fisher to find out. But I guarantee you he will throw his hat in the ring if he has not already. Number 3, Barry Odom. Here's him at Mizzou, where he was fairly successful. He's been great at UNLV. He's ripe for a power conference opportunity. West Virginia's a great fit. Ren Baker is an AD who comes from the Mack Rhodes circle and tree, and Mack Rhodes was Barry Odom's athletic director at Mizzou. So there are connections there. Ren Baker is going to be looking for a guy who can fire up the fan base, who can coach winning football, and who can, just keep some consistency throughout. That's what Barry Odom's career, especially at UNLV, has been, and he's won given the especially this year, he was dealt a real off-speed pitch with Matthew Sluka entering the transfer portal because of an NIL deal that they felt was botched, and the better quarterback was already on the roster. So you want guys crafty like Barry Odom. I think he's someone who certainly deserves a look and might need to be higher than number 3 on my list, to be honest with you. Number 2, Jason Candle from Toledo. Look, they already went the Mack route to get their basketball coach. Why not do it again with one of the best offensive minds in the country? This will fire up the fan base. Young coach, dynamic, ready for his shot at the big time. Jason Candle at Toledo could really spark some things and has a great eye for quarterbacks, has a great eye for offense, has a great eye for in-game adjustments. This is a guy, game management-wise, really like Jason Candle. He's going to get his shot sooner or later. I think the Mountaineers need to give him a shot. And number 1, Jeff Monken from Army. All this dude does is win with guys who aren't going to the NFL for the most part. And what you've seen with this Army team this year, their defense is violent. Their offense is legit. Bryson Daly is a stud. Now, he's not going to run the military academy system if he comes to West Virginia. He'll adapt and bring somebody in. But he knows coaching winning football, and it's probably time for Jeff Monken to get recognized for that. And I think that would be a great hire for West Virginia. Maybe I'll flip him and Barry Odom in number 1 and number 3 spots, but I wanted to leave some time to give props to a guy who's winning in a situation and winning in dominant fashion that has not been easy to win in dominant fashion in over the last few years that he has been at Army. That's going to do it for this Top 5. Tomorrow, we're going to talk UCF, and then on Wednesday, UNC and their candidates, provided no one gets hired between then and now. This is 365 Sports. Smokey will ring the bell
right now.
All right, I will. And by the way, I've got a decision in front of me, and I know some of you on the in the text chat room have given me your feedback. I know Paul has his, or Craig has his, Garrett, others, Emery. I got a Heisman Trophy vote coming up at the end of the weekend. And I'm telling you right now, I've had some decisions to make, and I'm getting email a lot with various things that Ashton Genty's done, and then also what Travis Hunter with 3 touchdowns a pick in that game they just played too. And Ashton Genty went off yet again for Boise State, and what a year he's had, both of them in different ways. I wish I could be a co-Heisman vote if that was possible. All right, thanks to Paul Catalina, Craig Smoak, Emery Winter. You want to say something, Craig? Jump in there.
I don't have anything
Jack
to say.
McKenzie and Garrett Ross, thank you very much to our sponsors. Those of you who watch us, whether on YouTube, through the Twitter feed of 365 Sports YT, and also on the app 365, Sikkim 365 app. I'm David Smoak. Have a great day. We'll be back, Paul, with Triple Option tomorrow at 1, and we're back on the air again tomorrow at 3. Good night, 365 Sports.